Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Kayla lay curled up on the dirty mattress, less hungry that way. It was the third day she couldn't bring herself to go to the dumpster where the homeless gathered in the evenings looking for food. She watched from afar with shuddering shrieks of joy as they retrieved bags and containers of leftover food from the homeless insides of the filthy dumpster. Then they sat down nearby and gorged themselves on what they could find. No, I can't do this, Kayla thought. I wouldn't be one of those unfortunates if my parents could see what I've become. Hot tears burned her cheeks, and she wrapped herself in an old stretchy sweater that hung on her like a hanger, but saved her from the chill of the night. A couple days ago, I had everything: a house, a business that my parents inherited from me, money and social standing. And today, I'm sheltering from the rain and wind in a filthy shed that the builders were too lazy to take with them. Oh my God! The girl folded her hands in prayer. Help me, do not let me die of cold. I have not offended you in any way. Suddenly, Kayla heard the sound of a car pulling up, and she cautiously peeked out of her hiding place. An expensive car pulled up next to the trash cans. A distinguished-looking man got out and took 2 trash bags out of the trunk. He placed them carefully by the trash cans and drove off. Kayla hesitated a moment, fearing that the owner would change his mind and return, then rushed to them, grabbed them, and where did the strength come from? And dragged the wagon. Barely catching her breath, she examined her loot and opened the first bag. Mother dear! She gasped and opened the second one with trembling hands. My God! The girl raised her eyes to the sky. Thank you, you heard my prayers. Kayla, all in black, stared blankly at the grave mound under which her parents had found their final resting place. Familiar and strangers approached her, offering condolences, and she still couldn't believe her parents were gone. Kayla was the only daughter in the family. The father managed to spin off well and create a good business, which should have been inherited by the son, but unfortunately, the couple had only one daughter. The girl did not disappoint her father and became a worthy heiress, received a good education. Just a few days ago, they were talking about all sorts of little things, making plans for a vacation, but these plans were not destined to come true. The accident took the lives of both of them. The woman was left alone, and if it were not for her husband, who all the time while the funeral ceremony was going on, supported her in every possible way, probably would not have stood it, would have fallen into despair. Let's go. Carefully, Gary put his arm around his shoulders. It's time to go home. You're shivering. Yeah. As if awakened from a slumber, Kayla said. Let's go home. I'm tired and I want to be alone. Thank you for being here. Gary put his grief-stricken wife in the car and drove her home. He looked at her sympathetically in the rearview mirror, but didn't say anything, seeing that she didn't want to talk right now. Half an hour later, they pulled up to the house. Gary helped the woman out of the car and opened the front door for her. Honey, you can't be so sad, the man said. You can't change anything. He carefully undressed her and took her into the living room. Think about yourself. You'll have to learn to live without them. Kayla sat at the table in the living room for a long time. In the center of the table was a photo from which her smiling parents looked at her. Honey, her husband called out to her. Stop sitting, you need to sleep. Who will feel better if you get sick? He walked over to her, picked her up like a little girl in his arms, and carried her into the bedroom. Kayla met Gary at a friend's birthday party. She noticed that a handsome young man kept his eyes on her all evening, but she didn't dare to approach him. Who is it? asked the girl from the hostess of the evening. Did she like him? She laughed. This is Gary, a very promising young man. He is not from our circle. His family is not rich, but he is very smart and courteous. I suggest you take a good look at him. He'd make the perfect husband. That night, Gary dared to approach Kayla. May I have this dance? The young man bowed his head gallantly to the girl. She gave him her hand and accepted the invitation. I see you are alone here, but where is your companion? Alas, there is no one worthy. Kayla smiled playfully at her partner. With whom would I want to share tonight? If I had at least one chance in 1,000 to accompany you tonight, I wouldn't let you get bored. Such a beautiful girl just can't stay alone for long. Kayla laughed. She liked the man's attention. The blatant flattery was naive and ingenuous, but not repulsive. My name is Gary. He introduced himself. And you, Kayla? I couldn't resist asking your friend for the name of the girl I liked. He watched her eyes carefully, noticing the smile on her lips. He smiled in return as well. The sadness was finally gone from your gray eyes. You move well. Did you take dancing lessons? The girl is from a rich family, has all the possible schools, art, music, dance of course, knowledge of foreign languages, and a good education. My father dreamed of an heir, and I was born. Your husband will be lucky. Gary said dreamily. It's rare to meet smart women these days. The music ended, and the young people did not leave each other's side. The young man suggested a walk in the garden. The evening was quiet. They hid in a gazebo from prying eyes. Maybe I wouldn't want to know so much, but I have to live up to my status, because someday I'll have to take care of business. Daddy reminds me of that regularly. No, the young man exclaimed jokingly. There will be a real man next to you, who will take on his shoulders all the worries about you. Didn't I tell you that I can predict the future? He raised his eyes enigmatically to the sky. I see that soon you will love a blue-eyed, black-haired, tall man, well-built, without bad habits. The character described is remarkably like you. Kayla accepted the flower that had appeared in the hands of her new acquaintance. The young man pressed her hands to his chest. Can you hear my heart beating? You've won me over from the first moment. I don't want to part with you. He brought her hands to his lips. That evening, Gary walked Kayla home. She was pleasantly surprised that he didn't even make an attempt to kiss her. The girl was bewitched by him. Daughter? Her mother met her in the living room. You're glowing. Are you in love? Who is he? The father asked. Do we know his parents? Before he enters our family, I would like to know as much about him as possible. No, Daddy. Kayla kissed her parents and spun around the room, still under the influence of the interaction with the young man. His parents aren't rich, but he's so. She rushed to hug her mother. You're not snobs, are you? You're not going to force me to marry a man from our circle, are you? You have to live with him. Father replied judiciously. I've only known him for a few hours, and it seems I've waited all my life to meet him. I don't want to think about anyone else. Do you believe in love at first sight? What's important to us is that you're happy. You just take your time, look at him carefully, and if he loves not your money, but you, we will not object and bless your marriage. Father is right. Mother is supportive. One must choose with one's heart. We will be happy to accept him into our family, just so that you, my daughter, be happy. Oh, Mom! Kayla thought, wrapped in some old clothes picked up at the dump and trying to protect herself from the chill of the night in the unheated construction trailer. If you had told your gullible daughter that besides the heart, you should listen to your head, I would not have to lie here on a dirty mattress. How could you, with your vast life experience, Not see through a lying man? It's not for me to say that. You truly believed in my family's well-being. The woman tried to forget herself with a disturbing dream, and the memory brought her back to the time when she was truly happy. Kayla was taking the death of her parents hard. She hadn't really gotten into business before, and now, grief-stricken, she had shifted all her worries onto her husband's shoulders. She stopped leaving the house, sat all day long in his father's office, did not answer the calls of friends. She stopped caring about anything at all. "Honey!" Gary, dressed in a strict dark suit, was in high spirits. His black hair was neatly styled, his blue eyes sparkling. He adjusted the collar of his carefully pressed shirt, walked over to his wife and kissed her. "Did you sleep badly again?" "Look at you. You don't look after yourself at all. You cannot kill yourself like that. It's been 6 months, and you can't reconcile with the death of your parents. Who's better off because you're crying from morning till night? You don't show up at the firm at all. Come on, get a grip. Life doesn't stand still. I don't think your father would have been happy with your condition. He hoped you'd carry on his business, not get depressed." Gary. Kayla looked up at her husband with tear-filled eyes. I want you to take over the firm. I don't know anything about it anyway. You were in charge of things under your father. It's the right thing to do, especially now that I don't have the energy to run the business. I'm sorry I put all this on you, but it's your father." The man objected. "He wanted you to run everything. I can't disobey his will, and it's in the will. Why don't we take our time? You come to your senses and get to the bottom of this, and I'll help you." "Gary, my love, I trust you." The woman said sadly, "You're a man. You're still in charge of all my affairs, only with my knowledge. I want to sign everything over to you so that you can dispose of everything without looking back. How stupid am I? Where were my eyes?" Kayla was brought back from memory to reality. How could I not see the falsity in my husband's words and actions? How could I have failed to notice the skillfully laid nets for me? I handed over the keys to the business, which my father built and kept for me, to this greedy swindler. I didn't feel he only wanted me for my money. He so skillfully built his plan that he managed to enrich himself at our expense and take over everything that I inherited from my parents. Business, real estate, money, everything was in his hands. With my own money, he hired people to help him cook up the deal and make him the unanimous owner of everything that belonged to my family. And then, Kayla burst into tears. "Gary, what took you so long?" Capriciously, the wife asked her husband when she heard the front door slam. She was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading a book, with her shoulder-length blonde hair loose and in soft, cozy pajamas. She looked very touching amidst the rich furnishings of the living room. "I was about to go to bed, and it is wrong for a husband and wife to go to bed at the same time. They have something to do in bed together. Get undressed, I miss you. Shall we go to the bedroom?" "Tired, my dear husband?" She approached the man, wrapped her arms around his neck, wanted to kiss him, but Gary squeezed her wrist painfully and took a step back. "As of today, you and I are no longer husband and wife." He looked at the woman squeamishly. "And anyway, I'm the boss here now, and I don't want any stranger in my house." "Gary, is this a joke?" Kayla stared at her husband, perplexed. "It's not a joke." "No, it's not a joke." The man took the documents out of his briefcase and threw them on the coffee table. "My dream has come true. I'm rich. This is my house." He spread his arms and shook them, smiling contentedly. "Only mine, and you don't belong here." "What do you mean you're home?" Kayla was indignant. "Actually, it's my parents' house. I inherited it. I don't want to offend your ego, but you have nothing to do with this house. I don't know why you're even having this conversation." "Wrong." Gary smirked. "You signed over your property and business to me, and now I own it, but you have nothing to do with it. What are you trying to say?" "I don't know what's going on." Fear crept into the woman's heart. "Explain to me exactly why you're scaring me." "I don't like this kind of talk. I don't want to hear anything." She put her hands over her ears and shook her head. "Stop it right now. Are you trying to make me angry? You did it. How could it be that you own everything? It's simple." Gary sat down on the couch without taking off his clothes and put his leg over his foot. "I transferred all your inheritance to myself. You have nothing now. You're a pauper. But I gave you permission to run our business, and I'm still the owner of the business. We can both have everything. We're husband and wife." "Yes, but you and I have nothing else in common. You're not my wife." He pulled out his passport and showed me the divorce stamp. "So I own all the property in the business, and you've got nothing." "But I did not give my consent to the divorce," Kayla said confusedly, looking into her husband's blue, cold eyes. "You couldn't divorce me. And no one needs the consent of the other party if you have a lot of money." He jumped to his feet. "I have plenty now. Get out. I don't want to see you again. You don't know how long I've waited for this moment, when I could kick you out the door in the middle of nowhere. I'm so sick of being a foster kid. You can't do this to me." Kayla screamed. "Tell me this is a joke." "Evil but still a joke. Stop it now. No one thought you were adopted. My parents truly loved you as their son. So much so that they left everything to you." Gary shouted angrily. "Though I was the one who ran the business, I was supposed to be the head of the firm, not your errand boy. They just didn't have time to change the will." Kayla tried to talk some sense into her husband. "You can't just get rid of me." "I can, because it's all mine now. Don't you get it yet?" "No, I'm dead serious about getting you out of here right now. I've wasted enough time on you already." He grabbed her shoulder painfully, spun her toward the door, and shoved her so hard that she almost fell. "Get out of my house. I don't want to see you. Forget your way in here. Gary, I love you." The woman looked at her husband pleadingly. "And you said you did. We dreamed of having children. Don't you remember that? We dreamed of traveling together. Remember how good we were together? We loved each other. Where did it all go overnight? Did I love you?" He laughed, and there was so much mockery in that laugh that Kayla realized his husband wasn't joking. "Never, do you hear me? I never loved you. I wanted your money. From the first minute I realized you didn't know anything about business. It would have been easy to fool around, but not your daddy. And then I got lucky, a car accident. I realized my hands were free now. You, by your own laziness, rewrote everything on me. You did not want to delve into the intricacies of business, preferred to indulge in grief for the dead parents, and then I just needed a divorce. That was no problem at all. Great, I did it. This is exactly what I dreamed of from the first day I met you, when I found out you were from a rich family. You fell in love with me like a cat, hanging all over me, dreaming of getting married as soon as possible. So I got married, since you were so eager, and waited for an opportunity. Get out of my life forever, I mean it. If it's not a joke." Kayla tried to resist her husband's rudeness. "Let me at least change. I'm not going out in my pajamas, am I? How am I going to show up there looking like this?" She felt that her self-control was about to leave her, and she would cry. How could her husband have done this to her? After all, there are personal things I want to take with me, documents. I can't even get a job without a passport. I'd like to get some money, at least for the first time. I'm not interested in your wishes. There's nothing of yours here. Everything is mine. Understand? He pushed her out again. Get out of my house. You're not getting a dime. Now feel what it's like to be poorer than a church rat. Gary, for God's sake, you can't put me out on the street like this, for God's sake. Who's gonna stop me? Your daddy? He laughed wryly. There isn't one. No one will help you. I'm finally going to do something I've wanted to do for a long time. Get out. You have no right to be in my house. He pushed a frightened Kayla outside and closed the door behind her. You should be thankful that I let you leave instead of calling the police and accusing you of trying to break into someone else's house, and I could have had you thrown in jail. So don't thank me, but dismiss your presence. Nobody would have believed you. Everybody in the neighborhood knows whose house it is. When you have money, you can buy any witness you want. Don't make me resort to extreme measures. Go away. Even tears won't help you today. The woman stood on the doorstep of the house her father had built, dreaming of living in a big family. What has happened to us? She thought. Why did Gary, so mean to me, take advantage of my helplessness? How come I gave my heart to the wrong man? How stupid of me! She berated herself. Kayla wandered down the dark alley, tears flowing. I can't get my father's business back and prove that Gary is a fraud and took advantage of the situation. After all, I signed the papers of my own free will and gave up what I had. I can't even file a police report because I don't have a passport. What should I do? Who do I look to for protection? Daddy, I miss you so much. You would definitely put this scoundrel, my husband, now ex-husband, in his place. No one can help me but you. But you're not here. I'm alone and I don't know where to go. Her feet led her to an abandoned construction trailer. No one had been there for a long time. There was a dirty, dusty mattress in the corner. Of course, it was not what she was used to, but the tired and exhausted woman had no choice. She sank down onto the mattress, squeezed herself into a lump, and closed her eyes. Nothing. Thought she was falling into oblivion. I'm going home tomorrow, so maybe Gary's just trying to teach me a lesson. I don't know why, though, but I'll stay here for now. I'll get a better morning. My nerves were taut as a string. Kayla couldn't sleep for a long time, but finally tiredness took its toll. Kayla was awakened by the morning chill. Fall was approaching, so pajamas weren't the most appropriate clothing. The woman stood up, stretched out her legs that were stiff from the uncomfortable position, and walked toward the house. She glanced around from time to time to make sure she didn't run into anyone she knew. Kayla was embarrassed to be walking around in her pajamas, and she hoped her husband had come to his senses overnight and would at least give her a chance to pick up her things. She rang the bell. The door immediately swung open as if Gary had been expecting her arrival. What do you want? Blocking the doorway, her husband looked at Kayla contemptuously. Gary? The woman shuffled from foot to foot in the cold, her voice shaking, the sharp wind chilling her to the bone, her silk pajamas chilling rather than warming. We fought enough. I don't know what you were trying to prove to me, but let's call it a day. Will you let me go inside and get my things? What? It's my house. Everything in it is mine. It's not your stuff. Go back where you came from. Did you really think I'd change my mind overnight? You were wrong. We have nothing to talk about. Why do you need all this? My family has never done anything to hurt you. On the contrary, my father tried to teach you everything. I don't understand what happened. Don't you have any sympathy for me? I'm not going to claim anything, but at least let me dress like a human being. I'm ashamed to appear in public like this. And you go to the garbage dump. There are a lot of suitable things for people like you. He openly mocked his ex-wife, then threw angrily. Get away from my house and don't show up here again, or I'll call the police. Go away. You won't get anything anyway. He pushed Kayla away and closed the door. The woman, swallowing her tears, walked back to the carriage house. There at least she could take shelter from the wind. She huddled again in a corner, tucked her legs under her, and fell silent, trying to keep warm, her stomach churning with hunger. We should wait until dark, she thought. I can't just walk around town in my pajamas. The first patrol car will pick me up, and I have no ID. Why don't we really look at the clothes? People often leave unwanted clothes by the trash cans. Embarrassing? Yes, but I can't do otherwise, or I risk freezing to death. I have no other choice if I'm going to find out the reason for my husband's strange behavior. She kept telling herself. When it got dark, the woman got out of her hiding place and approached the garbage cans. There were several bags lying around. The next day, she managed to get to her friend who lived nearby, stopped at the entrance and rang the intercom. Yes, hello. She heard her friend's sleepy voice. Lucy? Worried, the woman said. It's Kayla. Let me in. I need to talk to you. Kayla? The woman exclaimed in surprise. What happened? Why are you wearing such a strange outfit? The woman saw bewilderment and contempt in the eyes of her acquaintance. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Please open the door. I'm not comfortable standing outside. It's cold. What do you want from me? You see, Kayla spoke in a hurry. Gary and I had a fight. He won't let me in the house. What do you want from me? I don't have any money. You know I'm living on my father's handouts, right? Why don't you lend me your stuff and some money? I just haven't eaten since yesterday. Didn't he even leave you a card? No, he threw me outside in my pajamas. That's how it is. The girl stopped talking. I'm sorry. Lucy suddenly spoke in a haughty tone. I don't have an almshouse here. I don't give to beggars. I don't want my surroundings to rumor about me, as if I communicate with homeless people. I can't go to your house like this. I'm sorry, I don't have time to talk to you. I'm in a hurry to go to the beauty parlor. I have an appointment tonight. I have no desire to listen to you complain about your husband. I wasn't hired to be your shoulder to cry on. Don't come to me again. She hung up. Lucy, we're friends. Kayla tried to shout to her, but the answer was silence. How could it be? The woman was upset, crushed. We've been friends for years. I've helped her out so many times, and now that I need help, she just cut me out of her life. What am I supposed to do? Kayla thought. Turning around, the woman happened to see a sign for the police department. That's where I need to go, she rejoiced. This place will definitely help. She opened the door with determination. Hey, bum! A young policeman at the entrance shouted at her. Where are you going? Why do you allow yourself to insult me? The woman was indignant. You don't know anything about me. I don't need to know anything. Get out of here, get some sleep. But I don't drink. I need help. We know you. The policeman laughed. Don't have enough for a bottle? I don't serve in the morning. I need to get my papers back. My husband took them from me. And you have a husband, so go to him. Don't hang around here. How dare you talk to me like that? I need help. Who do I turn to? Listen, the young man looked threateningly at the intruder. Get out of here before I put you away for 15 days. Settle your family affairs amongst yourselves. She's going to write a statement here. How smart is she? I've got enough to deal with without you. Go on. He grabbed Kayla under the elbow and led her toward the exit. The whole place stank. You're disgusting to touch. Don't make me have to use force. The policeman pushed her out into the street. God, she prayed to herself. Help me to live. Nobody wants to help me, not even the police can give me justice. But I will not give up for anything. You only help me, teach me where to go next. So, racing thoughts in her head, Kayla walked back to the wagon. It was getting dusk outside. She saw some crates put up from a nearby store, next to the trash cans. The woman hesitantly approached, looking around and saw containers of salads, bread, some other food. Forgetting her pride, she grabbed what was at hand and returned to the wagon. Kayla greedily ate the discarded food and thanked the store employees for the fact that the food was quite tolerable. Judging by the smell, not the first freshness, but the woman didn't care. She was disgusted to realize that she had stooped to eating from a dumpster, but the shame was drowned out by a great desire not to starve to death and to punish the offender. I'll do anything to make justice prevail. Eating the food, Kayla swore to herself. Suddenly she heard the noise of a car engine. The woman cautiously peeked out of her hiding place. An expensive foreign car stopped near the garbage cans. The driver got out, placed 2 garbage bags by the bins, returned to the car, and immediately disappeared from the eyes of the astonished Kayla. She, not thinking long, rushed to the trash can, knowing that it was impossible to delay. There would be many people who wanted such a tidbit. She picked up the bags, and where did she get the strength from? Dragged them to the wagon. After a little breathing, opened it and marveled. Both bags were filled with things that can turn a gray mouse into a queen. Jesus. Kayla raised her hands to the sky. Did you hear my prayers? You sent me to the help of a man who had given me such a precious gift. She went through the contents of the packages. I can't believe my eyes. The woman rejoiced. And cosmetics, and everything necessary for hygiene, even a comb. She laughed. What's this? Kayla took the velvet box in her hands. Jewelry? Wow. No, I'll hide them for now, in case this man comes to his senses and comes back for them. I don't want any trouble. Oh my God! Fill the life of the man who gave me this treasure with grace. Now everything will be all right. Laughing, she tried on the dress. It was just right for her, a little long, but she looked great in heels. Tomorrow I'll go and write an application about the loss of my passport and let them try to refuse me. She shook her fist at the darkness. That night, Kayla slept like a dead woman. She didn't feel hungry from the excitement. She didn't even feel cold, and in the morning, having cleaned herself up, she went to the passport office first thing in the morning. No one even thought of chasing away a pretty, richly dressed young woman. Carefully styled, thick blonde hair and skillfully applied makeup left no doubt that the stranger was from high society. Stepping outside from the stuffy office, Kayla exposed her face to the last warm ray of sunshine and squeezed her eyes shut, breathing in the fresh, cool fall air. She walked into the thrift store and handed over one of the chains. I'm not doing anything wrong. She thought as she paid the passport fee. I will return the money to the owner if necessary, and I need the passport to get a job. The woman went to the store, bought herself a bottle of kefir and a fresh, crispy bun. What a blessing it was to eat proper food instead of rummaging through a garbage can. She enjoyed, sent piece after piece into her mouth, and savored every sip of kefir, and it seemed that it was the most delicious thing she had ever eaten in her life. God bless the man who gave me a chance to start living again. I'll get my papers, rent a cheap room, and one day I'll deal with my ex-husband, pay back every cent. I'll take back the business he swindled out of me, and if I can't get it back, I'll make even more money and ruin Gary, and I won't feel sorry for him one bit. I'd rather destroy my father's business with my own hands than have his business left in the hands of that unworthy man. But it's your own fault, isn't it? An inner voice whispered, You entrusted him with the management of your father's business. It's nothing, she answered herself. There will be a holiday on my street, but I promise that I will never open my soul to any man again. Adam sat at the meeting, listened to the customers' wishes, took notes, and waited for the moment of the deal. At such moments, he could think of nothing else. Even the phone, which did not stop ringing during the day, could not distract him from his work. Suddenly, the phone came to life and a message popped up on the screen. While you are earning money, your wife is having fun with her lover. Then came a photo. The man turned pale. His Nora, his beloved wife in the arms of a stranger. What the hell is this? He thought, this can't be true. What if it is? Jealousy flared up inside. Adam stood up. I apologize. I'm in a bit of trouble. I have to leave immediately. Can you finish without me? My deputy is on top of signing the deal. Mason? He turned to the young man who was making the presentation. I know you won't let me down. I'll be back in a couple hours. Yeah, I'll do it, Adam. Don't worry. I hope nothing serious has happened. Mason looked worriedly at the chief. I don't know yet. Adam apologized and jumped out of the meeting room. The man ran headlong into the parking lot. I have to make sure the photo is authentic. He thought as he got behind the wheel, and the car sped off. I want to look the traitor in the eye. I want to hear what she has to say for herself. It's time to set things straight. He glanced at the screen once more, checking against the address given by the message. A few minutes later, Adam pulled up outside the hotel and turned off the engine, sat for a few minutes, gathering his strength, then abruptly swung open the door and staggered into the building. What if the message and the photo were sent to sabotage a good deal, and all I saw was Photoshop? Suddenly he thought, then I'll dig up the ground, but I'll find the person who benefited from it. He'll be held accountable for trying to sully my wife's honorable name. Although, Adam clenched his fists. The photo looks too much like the truth. All right, we'll figure it out. He decided, approaching the receptionist's desk. The girl? Smiling with only one lip, Adam said, My wife prepared a surprise for me and said that she would wait for me in the room of this hotel. He dictated his wife's details. A key, would you be so kind? The girl did not even call the room to make sure whether they really want to see a new guest in the room, and gave the key. Would you like a bouquet of flowers in your room? The receptionist offered. Thank you. My boss will give me a ride. Adam lied, trembling with excitement. The girl shrugged her shoulders, but did not object. The man quickly went up to the floor. He stood at the door, hesitating to open it. Finally, he gathered his courage and entered the room. The first person the man saw was the hapless lover. He was walking around in his underpants, holding a bottle of sparkling wine in his hand, occasionally touching the neck. Pleasant music was playing. Women's laughter was heard. Adam? Emma was stunned. How are you here? Adam, without answering, walked into the room. The lover was speechless. He tried to say something, but only silently opened his mouth. The trader's wife ran in, hurriedly pulling the blanket over herself. Adam, this all means nothing to me. It's not what you thought. What was I supposed to think? It's all very clear. You didn't rent such an expensive room for a tea party, did you? Adam clutched at his heart, trying to stop the pain. Darling, Nora, throwing back the blanket, rolled off the bed and rushed to her husband. Are you sick? Yes, I feel sick. Slowly, Adam said, pulling away from her friend, who realized that she was standing in front of her husband in a semi-transparent red negligee, and immediately retreated, grabbing the bedspread. I feel sick because I've been fooled all this time." He tried to calm his rapid breathing. "Emil?" He turned to the man still standing in his underwear and with the bottle in his hand. "You've been to our house. I trusted you. Not a single family holiday was without you. While I was away on business, you were assigned to look after my wife, and you took advantage of my absence and climbed into someone else's bed. You did, Nora." Turned to his wife, the deceived man. "You claimed Emil was your cousin. Lied then, and I, a blind man, had nothing against him. Hosted him in my house, pleasured him in every possible way. How could he be a cousin? I'd love to punch you in your satisfied face." He swung at his wife's lover, who recoiled in fright. "I won't get my hands dirty. Go on." Emil yelled. He still held the bottle in his hand and didn't get dressed. "It'll only cost you," the man said defiantly, recovering from his fright. He realized that Adam had no intention of fighting him. "I'll make such a fuss, I'll make a big deal out of it. I know, that's why I won't get my hands dirty. You can't solve anything with your fists anyway, and I don't want to do time for such a bastard. One thing to defend the right thing, or stand up for someone. But here there is nothing to protect, no honor or conscience left at the unworthy wife. I'll make it easy." He grabbed Nora's purse, opened it and took out the key to the apartment. "I don't want you in my house." He turned to his wife. "Stay in what you wore to meet your lover." "Adam," the woman whimpered. She, wrapped in a blanket, reached up to kiss her husband. "Don't be angry. It was a momentary weakness. Yes, I admit I'm trashy, but you're not home all the time. Do you want me to send him away now? I'll never open the door to our home where you and I were happy again." Key word, we were. Adam answered her harshly. "We are no more, just as there is nothing of yours in my house, all bought by me and with my money. You will get nothing in the divorce. You made your own choice. I won't get in your way, lovers." The man grinned bitterly and headed for the door. "Adam, you can't leave me. You said you loved me." Realizing that her husband was serious, Nora exclaimed, "I will die without you." "Without my money, you mean?" The man looked away. "It's no longer my concern. Let Emil provide you with a secure existence." "Hey, Emil." He turned mockingly to his lover. "She loves expensive salons and clothes from the latest European collections." "Thank you. You don't even realize what a favor you've done me. Goodbye, my friends." He slammed the door, stood in the corridor, coming to his senses. Behind the ostensible mockery, there was despair, and it was so heavy that he wanted to howl. Barely moving his feet, Adam returned to the hotel lobby, returned the room keys to the receptionist, and went home. The girl looked at him carefully, but did not dare to ask him anything. She felt that the visitor was not in the right state to answer questions. The man did not remember how he got into the car, how he got to the apartment. He only came to his senses when he tried to insert the key into the keyhole of the door of his apartment with shaking hands. He entered without turning on the light, and without undressing, threw himself on the bed, beat his fists on the soft bed until he was exhausted. Soon he fell asleep. I lay there for a long time, trying to realize what had happened. I was deceived by the woman I loved so dearly, he thought, to whom I had opened my soul. She betrayed me, spit on my feelings, and I trusted her. My wife, for whom I would have done anything, had led me astray for so long. Did she ever love me, or was it all for money? He groaned with impotent anger at his gullibility. The man had not expected that he would be so painful to experience the separation from his unfaithful wife. They were having a good time at my expense. I did not spare anything for her. She never needed anything, and did not know where the money comes from. I worked like a hard laborer so that my beloved had everything she wanted, repaid with black ingratitude. Adam rolled over onto his back, lying with his arms spread, staring aimlessly at the ceiling. A dark, agonizing emptiness had settled in his heart, which had recently been filled with love. He closed his eyes. Immediately his imagination drew the frightened face of his wife when she realized that the deception was revealed. Just then the insistent ringing of the doorbell sounded. Adam did not move from his seat. He didn't want to see anyone. Then there was a drumming at the door, and he heard Nora's voice. Reluctantly, he got up and went out into the hallway. "Adam," his wife begged him. "Open the door, please. I know you're home. Let me explain everything." "Don't be silent." The artificial flames in the electric fireplace were not soothing. Their reddish tongues reminded Adam of the bloody wounds his wife's adultery had left on his heart. "We loved to sit in that chair, hugging and clinging to each other." The man spoke regretfully as he watched the flames dance behind the glass door of the fireplace. His voice echoed in the empty apartment. "We weren't cramped then. We wanted to stay close to each other all our lives and grow old together. And we also dreamed that in the evenings we would walk along the beach, holding hands, listening to the splash of the waves and admiring the sunset. Yes, only next to me I saw a completely different person, not this trash, who traded me for a smarmy lover. She had derailed my whole life, destroyed my faith in good, tender feelings." He closed his eyes again, remembering the first time he'd met Nora. Adam stopped for a bite to eat at his favorite cafe. He was a regular here, so the table where he usually had breakfast was always free. The man settled down in his usual place and looked around while waiting for the waiter. His attention was attracted by a girl. She impatiently gestured, tried to hide behind her ear, not obedient strand of thick black hair, which lay in waves on her shoulders. The stranger was crying, sobbing like a little child, sighing convulsively, her narrow shoulders shuddering. She did not have time to wipe away the large tears that rolled from her eyes, and they fell on her dress, leaving a wet trail. Adam smiled. Such a picture would not leave anyone indifferent. He waved to the waiter, pointing to the table where the stranger was sitting. He stood up, walked over to her, and sat down across from her without asking permission. "Hello, my heart bleeds when I see a girl crying." He smiled broadly, trying to draw attention to himself. "Can I help you?" He whispered something in the waiter's ear, while he looked at his vis-a-vis with interest. The girl looked at him with tear-stained eyes, wiping her swollen nose with a paper napkin. It was so touching that the man's heart trembled. It struck Adam that the stranger was not wearing makeup. She didn't need it, though. Dark, long, fluffy eyelashes framed expressive brown eyes, eyebrows, gracefully arched, the envy of any beauty. She definitely liked him. "You can't help me," the girl said with a curve of her plump lips. "I've failed the session, and it's a total disaster for all my dreams." Guessing that the stranger probably came from the province, there are no such knave people in the city. Adam decided to deal with the situation, at least to support the hapless student. Meanwhile, the waiter brought the order. "Will you have breakfast with me?" The man offered. "I don't have the money to pay for it." The girl cast a hungry look at the table, where the waiter put out plates of salads, cakes, and cups of coffee. All that was left was to buy a return ticket. He picked up her empty water glass. "Do you really think I've let a woman pay for a table? What kind of men have you had to socialize with?" Adam looked at her perplexed. "Eat and tell me in detail what happened to you." "My name is Adam, by the way. What's yours?" "I'm Nora." The girl blushed embarrassedly. The usual story. She sobbed again. I couldn't pass the session, so I'll have to take a leave of absence. They'll kick me out of the dormitory now, so I have nowhere to live. And you don't want to go home? Adam finished her thought. Where to? Nora burst into flames. To the village? What would I do there? No work, no prospects. Mother, always suffering from lack of money. Father drunk from morning to night. Their gardens for me, that's where they sit. She slashed herself in the throat with the edge of her palm. Since I was 5 years old, I was forced to work in the garden. I so dreamed that in the city, I'll get a foothold, graduate from university, find a decent job, and now, she cried again. Oh, come on. He stopped her. Stop being so damp. There's no such thing as a hopeless situation. I'll see what I can do to help you. Come on, how can you help me? Wiping her tears with a paper napkin, Nora said sadly, I have nowhere to live anyway. It takes time to find a job. Even if a miracle happens and I get a job somewhere, when will I get a salary? On credit, no one will rent a room. I've only got 2 days to vacate the dormitory. You can stay with me temporarily. Unexpectedly for himself, Adam suggested it. Why? He hurried up, afraid that the girl would refuse. I live alone, in a 4-room apartment. I only come home to sleep. We cannot even meet. No. She shook her head, his new acquaintance. I can't. It's indecent. If you're afraid I'll make a pass at you. He smiled, noticing how the stranger blushed. I mean, you can be quite calm here. I don't throw myself at a girl if she doesn't want me to. Besides, all the bedrooms are locked from the inside with a key. Noticing the doubt in Nora's eyes, he made what he thought was the last and most convincing argument. I won't charge you for accommodation, but you'll cook and clean the apartment for me in return, and I'll think about a job. Is it a deal? You're very kind to me, but I don't take no for an answer. Adam said firmly. He glanced at his watch and hurried off. Listen, I don't have much time. Why don't I take you to the apartment, show you around, and give you the key? Do you have a lot of stuff? Not at all. Nora was embarrassed. Just a small suitcase and a bag. Will you move out of the dormitory by yourself? The girl nodded. That's fine. Let's go. He went back to the apartment, showed the room, gave the keys and left, leaving the new acquaintance at a loss. In the evening, Adam was waiting for a clean, tidy apartment and a sumptuous dinner. Oh, I wasn't wrong about you, cheerfully said the man, returning from work in the evening and looking at the set table with amazement. It looks appetizing. Where did you learn to cook like that? He took a bottle of wine from the bar, filled the glasses. It's all Mom's. Nora's eyes lit up with joy. She couldn't believe her luck, because in the morning she had thought she would have to go home, and now she had a single man, and a handsome one at that. She looked at him with interest, dark, slightly wavy hair, blue eyes, straight nose, lips, with a clearly defined line of lips on the stubborn chin dimple. Tall, athletic, on him perfectly sat strict expensive suit. Well, shall we drink to our casual acquaintance? He looked at the girl carefully, took a sip, put the glass on the table, and started eating. Emma. Closing his eyes with pleasure, he savored. How delicious. I suggest we have a drink for a Browder cat? He stood up and walked over to Nora. She stood up too. Adam looked into her brown eyes and kissed her slowly, savoring the taste of her lips. He decided not to go too far so as not to scare the girl with his assertiveness. He returned to his seat, leaving her completely confused. So we've met. You wanted to think about a job for me. Coping with indignation, the girl spoke up. You, he reminded her. We agreed to tell each other you. I haven't decided what to offer you yet. Adam really had no idea what she could do at his firm, but he couldn't leave his new acquaintance in the lurch. He liked her. For now, I think, let's you keep an eye on the house, clean, wash, iron shirts for me, live here, and I'll give you some money for personal expenses. How's that sound? When your sabbatical is over, you can go back to school. I agree. Nora was delighted. The prospect of living with a rich and handsome man beckoned, and she didn't have to do much. The work was familiar. Secretly, she hoped to win Adam's heart. Her feminine instincts told her that he would not mind reciprocating. Since that day, Nora began to keep the house cozy, washing, ironing Adam's things, cooking him breakfast and dinner, and even packing lunch for work. Sincere care about him conquered the man. He could not resist and decided that this is the kind of wife he had always dreamed of. Beautiful, intelligent, and so homely. Nora combined all the qualities that had always attracted him. Why don't you marry her if she's so wonderful? Asked Adam, his closest friend, as they relaxed in a bar after a week of work. I guess you're right, the man replied thoughtfully. It's time to make up my mind. I've had enough of being a bachelor. I have enough money to provide for my wife. I have achieved everything in life. It's time to think about in hair. My friend laughed. Make up your mind before someone else steals her from under your nose. And Adam decided. One evening he came home with a huge bouquet of flowers. Nora. Unusually, he said solemnly, I've only just met you, but I feel like you're the woman I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with. I am no longer 18 years old. I am ready to take responsibility for the family and consciously go to this step. Tell me, will you marry me? Nora, who had not expected such a quick confession, became emotional. Oh, Adam, I've never met a man like you before. And of course I will be your wife. I am so glad that I came to the cafe on that happy day and met you. You were sent to me by fate. Now I am not upset that I had to leave the university, because then I would never have met you. She confessed her feelings for him so sincerely that he did not doubt the rightness of her choice. The man put a gold ring on her finger. Ah, Nora said admiringly, looking at the gift. How beautiful is it? Thank you. She threw herself on her chosen one's neck and kissed him. In her heart, she rejoiced that everything was going so well in her life. Maybe I seem old-fashioned, but let's not have a lavish wedding. Adam suggested, we'd rather go on a wedding trip abroad. Wherever you wish. Yes, my love. Nora agreed to everything, as long as the fairy tale she had accidentally fallen into never ended. The wedding was celebrated modestly, with few friends and relatives. Nora, why didn't your parents come to the wedding? Asked the girl mother-in-law. I would really like to meet them. Adam told me that they are ordinary people, but that's great. I would say thank you to them for such a wonderful daughter. The daughter-in-law blushed with joy. Adam was like a changed man. I've never seen him so happy. We have there a little family problems, which did not allow to be at the wedding. The girl answered evasively. She could not admit that she was ashamed to invite her village parents to a decent society. She knew that her father was bound to get drunk and worse, to cause a debauch, and they didn't have any decent clothes for such a celebration. But they would come someday, she promised discreetly. After the wedding, Nora felt as if she'd been replaced. First, she stopped cooking. Honey? Adam came home from work and once again found food from the restaurant on the table. I missed home-cooked food. He reached up to kiss her. I've been to enough restaurants. Ah, honey, I didn't have time. Don't be angry. The woman pouted her lips resentfully, hugging him and deliberately harder, unzipping her robe so he could admire her seductive breasts. I had to go to a beauty parlor. You want your wife to be beautiful, don't you? Or do you feel sorry for the money I spend on myself? You're already beautiful. The happy husband smiled condescendingly. And you know very well that I do not spare anything for you, but still I like to eat what you cook. He swooned in her arms and forgot about everything in the world. I looked for a beautiful pants. They fit me so well that the seller in the boutique advised me to order a photo shoot. You'll even give me money, won't you? Of course, darling. He took a card out of his jacket pocket and handed it to his wife. Here, designed especially for you. Use it without denying yourself anything, but still be prudent. You are just a miracle. The woman clapped her hands and kissed her husband tenderly. By the way, Adam remembered. There's a bill from the cleaning company. Do we use their services? Yes, I ordered them. Nora confessed. I'm sorry about the manicure I got recently. I don't want the skin on my hands to be wrinkled and saggy when I'm old. Why do you think I go to beauty salons, visit various spa procedures, all to look attractive? I even signed up for yoga. You've been working out, right? I'm still doing it. I don't want to turn into an old woman, so I'm keeping in shape. It's all for you. Those cleaning girls cleaned the apartment in half an hour, and I'd have to spend all day on it. Come here. Adam took his wife in his arms and carried her into the bedroom. You're the most beautiful. Do whatever you want, if you want. I have enough money for all your whims. He wanted to fulfill her every whim. I understand that you want to enjoy life until we have children, then you won't have time for that. I don't want to limit you in anything, but I think it's time to think about in hair. What do you think? Oh, darling, Nora whispered, pining for her husband's caresses. I'm so happy. I love you so much. You are so. Adam was at the pinnacle of bliss. He was not interested in other women. He was swimming in the sea of joy that his wife gave him. It seemed that nothing could overshadow their family prosperity, but as it usually happens, the fairy tale ended in a very unexpected way. Adam struggled to pull himself out of his memories. The apartment was dark. Only the not bright flame of the fireplace cast a shadow on the floor. The man stood up. We should pack Nora's things. He thought, I don't want anything to remind me of her. He made his way to the bedroom, opened the closet, and began putting expensive brand-name clothes into garbage bags. Wow, what's this? Adam retrieved a folder safely hidden underneath the dresses. He opened it and turned pale. That bitch decided to leak information to competitors about my most profitable deals. I wonder who she works for. Oh, and there's a cell phone. Let's see. An unfamiliar number, a message? Wow. Adam was flipping through the notes and getting more and more furious, his face tense, and I wondered why lately all the lucrative contracts were falling through and we had to settle for the small ones. She passed my every move to a nameless interlocutor, and judging by the dates, for a long time. It all makes sense now. Competitors knew what I want to offer, put forward more favorable terms, and not just tear down contracts. They used the developments of my firm. What a bitch! What was she missing? Pulled out of the province, did not spare anything, and she is not enough. Barely restraining himself, the man with anger threw the last dresses torn off the hanger into the bag, got dressed, picked up the bags and went outside, without thinking, loaded them into the car and took them to the trash. Like this, putting the bags next to the bins, said the man. Somebody will need these expensive clothes, and in my house, so that their spirit was not. Satisfied with rubbing his hands, Adam sat down behind the wheel. That's it, my dear wife. He said to his reflection in the rearview mirror, "Now it's just a matter of getting you out of my heart. It won't be easy, but I can do it." Back home, Adam put the file in his briefcase. "And I'll deal with you, strange gentleman, tomorrow. It's time to dot the I's and cross the T's. I'll turn the documents over to the police, have them file a fraud case. I'm not gonna let this go. If Nora gets caught, I won't help. Let her get what's coming to her." It's been a month. Adam gradually recovered from the breakup with his wife, filed for divorce, and focused on business. Things in the firm began to improve gradually, which could not help but be gratifying. "Adam?" The office door opened and Clara's secretary appeared. "There is a girl came to us for an interview for the position of a lawyer. Should I invite her in?" "Yes, call her in." Adam put aside his business and got ready to meet the next applicant. On the threshold appeared a pretty young woman. In her gray eyes read uncertainty and fear. "Well, it's understandable, because I don't know if I'll hire her or not." Adam thought, scrutinizing her from head to toe. Something about her appearance made him suspicious. The stranger submitted a resume. On her ring finger, the man noticed a ring very similar to the one he had given to his ex-wife. No way! Adam shook his head, shaking off the obsession. It wasn't exclusive, though. She could have bought one just like it. Is something wrong? The woman asked cautiously, noticing the businessman's strange reaction. "No." Coming out of his reverie, Adam said, "Everything is fine. You write that you used to work in your father's firm, but why are you working for me?" "My parents died." With restraint, the woman replied, "Your father also had a construction firm." "Yes, I'm familiar with the specifics of working in construction." Adam was surprised. "You even managed to win a few lawsuits. Commendable." "Well, I think we'll work well together, Kayla. Clara will help you with the paperwork, tell you everything. Come to work tomorrow. I'm a very strict boss, and I don't like tardiness, so keep that in mind." "That's it, you can go." Kayla was over the moon. Getting a job in a prestigious firm was incredibly difficult. She was warmly welcomed into the team. After a week, Adam realized that she was a good employee. He watched her with interest. During breaks, she did not look at the phone screen, but read something all the time. "Kayla?" One day, Adam approached her at the end of the working day. "I need to prepare a draft contract urgently. I'll send you all the data. It may take a long time, but I need to draw up the contract in a short period of time. Otherwise, the contract will leave us for another customer. How much time do I have?" "A day, 2 at the most. Can you stay after work if you need to?" "You won't be lost at home?" "Yes, I can stay late." Without answering any personal questions, the woman informed him. Adam was pleasantly surprised that she immediately agreed, did not object or demand for herself any additional conditions. 2 days later, he congratulated the team on the conclusion of a favorable contract, noting Kayla's excellent work. "We're doing the same thing." Kayla remarked, embarrassed by the attention of the employees who began to congratulate her. "Thank you for appreciating my work." Adam was enjoying talking to this soft-spoken woman who knew almost nothing about her. "Clara?" Notwithstanding his curiosity, one day the man asked, "Do you know if she is married?" "I don't know." The secretary shrugged. "She doesn't discuss her private life with anyone, but there's no stamp in her passport." "I checked. She lives in a rented apartment." "I see," Adam said thoughtfully. Some time later, Kayla had to stay late again. Drawing up the contract, Adam stayed with her because it was necessary to send the documents to the customer on the same day. That was it. Tossing the pen away, the man stood up, straightening his shoulders. "I have to take a break. I'm hungry and I want to order a pizza. Do you like pizza? He asked the woman. I love pizza. She smiled back, especially with mushrooms. If I had a cappuccino with cinnamon, I could sit here till morning. Our tastes match, Adam remarked happily. He quickly ordered food delivery. I noticed that you read during your breaks. What do you read, if it's no secret? Mostly legal literature, but at home I like to read historical books at bedtime. I wanted to be a scientist, but my dad insisted I become a lawyer. I had to hand over the reins to someone when the time came. Do you like music? Adam decided not to go into questions about his personal life, fearing to break the fragile thread of a trusting conversation, but to transfer the conversation to a neutral course. I listen every day, morning and evening. Kayla happily picked up the familiar theme, especially the classics. The pizza arrived. They took a quick bite and plunged back into their work. No important details were to be missed. Adam noticed that he felt relaxed and at ease around this woman. From time to time, he threw an interested glance at her, but she did not notice it. She worked with concentration. She wasn't trying to capture his attention or impress him. It seemed to him that Kayla simply didn't notice how he felt about her, and he didn't even fully understand what was happening to him. I promised myself. At midnight, sitting at home by the fireplace, talking to myself, that no woman would ever enter my heart again. I guess I miscalculated. I like Kayla. I like looking at her, listening to her voice, seeing her work. What to do with all that? How do I know how she feels about me? We should ask her out to a restaurant. Adam decided and, inspired by the idea, went to bed. The next day, he asked Clara to call Kayla. What are you doing tonight? From the doorstep, the man puzzled his subordinate. Nothing much. Kayla was confused. Great, Adam rejoiced. Then I invite you to the restaurant. There will be live music. Do you think it's convenient? The woman hesitated. You are my superior. I am a subordinate. That's why I won't punish you for office romance. Adam laughed, and Kayla blushed. So how? Do you agree to spend the evening with me? Yes, she answered quietly. The evening turned out to be wonderful. They enjoyed each other's company, discussed new literature, argued about modern music, and listened to live sound. Kayla, can I invite you to the dance floor? Adam stood up, extended his hand. Kayla did not refuse. They moved to the beat of the music. Adam inhaling the scent of her toilet water, he was pleased to hold her warm hand. She looked completely defenseless. He wanted to shield her from any worries. Adam walked Kayla home. She hadn't invited him over, and he hadn't asked, realizing she needed time. He himself didn't have a good idea of what this woman meant in his life, did he? They started seeing each other after work, and almost every day spent time together. Oh my God, he pondered, sitting in a chair by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket. I think I love this woman. I'm as ready as a boy to get a star from the sky for her, and I can't help it. I can't keep silent any longer. I want to know how she feels about me. What am I waiting for? He reasoned with himself. I'm not at the age to hide my feelings for long. It's time to admit to myself that I want to marry her. And if she refuses? The man hesitated. Then I'll just shut it down, but I won't forgive myself if my indecision plays havoc with me and Kayla falls in love with someone else. A woman needs clarity. The very next day, Adam bought the ring. For some reason, he decided it would be romantic to take her out for a weekend of skiing. After renting a hotel room, the man went to talk to Kayla. I don't want to seem too intrusive in your eyes, but do you want me to invite you to the ski lodge this weekend? He laughed when he saw the confusion in Kayla's eyes. Of course, I should have asked you if you like skiing before I booked your hotel room. I love skiing. The woman replied. It was just too sudden an offer. Adam could hardly wait for the weekend. The weather was perfect. A light frost pinched their cheeks, but the young people didn't notice it. They were happy to be together. They met at a restaurant after a long ride. Thank you for bringing me here. Kayla, blushing in the fresh air, looked like a mischievous girl, her eyes shining, and a smile on her pretty face. Adam marveled at her. Kayla? He was worried, not sure how to start the conversation. Damn it, I've completely forgotten how to compliment women. The man was silent for a moment, searching for words. Then he suddenly blurted out, Kayla, marry me. He took a ring out of his pocket, took his girlfriend's hand, and put it on her finger. I don't know how you will feel about my proposal, but I can't keep quiet any longer. All the days and nights I think only of you. I once swore to myself that no other woman would ever touch my heart again. I had a difficult divorce. He suddenly found Kayla crying, trying to quickly express everything Adam thought, not noticing the state the woman was in. What's wrong with you? Did I hurt you? He asked worriedly. It's not you. Kayla shook her head. It's about me. I can't accept your offer. But why? Adam shouted so loudly that the customers at the neighboring tables started to look around. You don't like me? If you refuse me, I understand. I have the most serious, pure intentions. I will not do anything bad to you. I am not at all what you think I am. I have nothing behind my soul. It is unlikely that your neighborhood will like a woman who until recently was picking up trash and lived in a construction worker's trailer, hiding from the police. Kayla was afraid to look at Adam, afraid to read the contempt in his eyes, but she couldn't stay silent any longer. She liked him, so she didn't want to mislead him. I'm a beggar. Everything I'm wearing I found in a dumpster. Some man left garbage bags of women's clothes and jewelry. I sold some of the jewelry, and the proceeds helped me get my life back on track. If I met a man who made me feel like a woman again, I would kiss him. This stranger saved me from certain doom. Kayla forced herself to look up at Adam and saw that he was smiling. She looked at him in amazement, not realizing what was going on. I was wondering where you got my ex-wife's ring. I was not crazy when I saw it on you, and this dress I bought for her in Milan. Now everything is back to normal. You can kiss your savior. The man laughed. He is in front of you. How? Kayla gasped. It can't be. Yes, it can. I guessed long ago that you were the owner of my ex-wife's things, but I didn't ask, though I was dying of curiosity. You know what? Adam raised his glass. I propose to drink. I really want to know how you ended up on the street, but even more I want to hear the answer to my proposal. Before we do that, let's switch to you, shall we? I have the right to demand it, you'll agree. He smiled again. In the dim light of the restaurant, Kayla looked even more charming than usual. Embarrassed by her confession, she expected Adam to immediately get up and leave for good. Instead, the man, as if nothing had happened, continued the interrupted conversation. The woman didn't know how to behave. Kayla, will you marry me? After all you've heard about me, are you still proposing marriage? Of course I am. I've learned to be a good judge of character. I know you're the kind of person I'd like to spend the rest of my days with. I don't care if you're rich or poor. I love you just the way you are. As for money, I have plenty. What do you say? Adam looked at Kayla expectantly. I agree, she whispered. Thank you. The man rejoiced, grabbed her hand, kissed it. He looked into the gray eyes of his chosen one and saw in them an answering fire of desire, felt that their heart beat in unison. I was afraid you would refuse me. After my wife cheated on me, I stopped trusting women, but you're different. That day, throwing my past into the trash, I didn't even realize that my heartfelt impulse would save someone's life. You must have secretly laughed at me when you first found me wearing my wife's clothes. No, were you? Adam exclaimed fervently. I had no intention of laughing at you. On the contrary, I saw it as a sign of fate. Who knows if we would have met under different circumstances? He was quiet. I know it's hard for you to talk about this, but I want to know how it happened that you lost your father's business. Was he a rich man? Yes. Kayla, saddened, the memories she had been trying to forget for so long came flooding back, tears showing in her eyes. I've upset you, I'm sorry. Adam looked anxiously at the woman. He squeezed her hands, trying to be supportive. If it's hard for you, don't say anything. No. Kayla brushed away the traitorous tears. I need to talk about this. I've been alone for so long, I can't believe anyone is interested in my story. You're right, my father was rich. We'd had a house, a well-established business. It all came crashing down when my parents died in a car accident. My husband took advantage of my weakness and took everything. He threw me out on the street, left me with nothing but my pajamas. That's how I was faced with the choice of either dying or forgetting my pride and wearing other people's clothes to survive. Bastard? Adam threw. A deafening rage rose in him at the stranger. Could nothing have been done? Maybe there could be. Kayla grinned. But who would listen to the ramblings of a homeless woman? I didn't even have a passport. He bought the front men, thought of everything in detail. I couldn't deal with him and prove fraud because I'd given him the right to run the business. So I decided to get a good job, eventually open my own firm, and ruin his business. I must avenge his betrayal. He betrayed not even my gullibility, but the memory of my parents, and for that there is no forgiveness. And you know, Adam said thoughtfully, we have both experienced betrayal of people we love. My wife cheated on me with another man, whom I considered almost a relative, but I'm not going to take revenge on the cheater. She's already punished. But I will help you to restore justice, but it will be tomorrow. He looked slyly at the woman. Right now, I can't wait to be alone with you. They returned to the room. This night was the first, the most unforgettable and romantic. Adam had pre-ordered champagne, fruit, and flowers. Everything was already ready for their arrival. Even the candles were burning. Thank you. Kayla whispered in her lover's ear, snuggling into his arms. I didn't expect to be happy ever again. I didn't expect fate to give me such a royal gift either. Gently kissing her, Adam said, I can't wait any longer. I have been dreaming about you since the very first time we met. Let's not waste a minute. I want to hold you in my arms and not let you go anywhere. That night was the beginning of their new life. They returned to the city completely different. Stopping the car in front of Kayla's house, Adam said, I don't want to break up with you. Why don't you move in with me? I will. I just need to pack. Are you waiting for me? Just take the papers and the essentials. I won't let you wear my ex-wife's clothes anymore. It reminds me too much of her. I'd love to update your closet. The woman smiled and kissed him in gratitude. I'll be back soon. She promised and disappeared through the doorway. On Monday, they came to work as if nothing had happened, but the employees immediately noticed the change. Everyone was curious, but no one dared to gossip. Adam himself gathered the team in the conference room and announced, Friends, I have some important news to share with you. Kayla and I have decided to get married. Everyone present laughed, applauded, rushed to congratulate the young people. I'm so happy for Adam. Vigorously shaking Kayla's hand, Clara. We were afraid that after breaking up with his wife, he would do something to himself, very worried about her cheating. You are nothing like Nora. I'm sure you will be happy. Kayla, I didn't expect such a supportive, sympathetic, hugging girl. She still didn't believe that all the troubles were over. Adam invited everyone to the table. Immediately champagne appeared from somewhere, a light appetizer. When is your wedding? Someone asked. The wedding is already scheduled. We decided not to make it a lavish celebration. We will celebrate modestly. Friends, eat, drink, but don't forget about work. I'll leave you to it. He approached his fiancée. Darling, I have to go. I have some matters to attend to. I'll be right there. He kissed her on the cheek and left. Alone in his office, Adam called the head of security. Michael, I have a favor to ask of you. I need you to dig up some material on this man. He handed the man a photo of Kayla's ex-husband and a folder of documents. Find out everything you can about how he managed to take his wife's property without her consent. Then turn him in to the police? No, I'll get the files first, and then we'll figure out what to do with him. Try not to take too long to decide. A few days later, the head of security came to Adam with a report, and the man is not bad to make a profit at the expense of his wife, but he did not expect that he would have to deal with real investigators. Thought he intimidated the woman, and that was the end of it. If she'd wanted to, she'd have had him out in no time. She couldn't. He left her without a passport. Bastard. Michael remarked harshly. He gave the chief all the documents. I ordered an examination of the authenticity of the signature on the divorce papers. Forgery. Found the will Kayla's father left behind. The documents she signed were pretty slick, but we found clues there too. It's all recoverable with a good lawyer. Are we going to go to trial? No. Adam's pleading. We'll deal with him ourselves. We'll go to his place first, but we'll have to get the papers in Kayla's name. The next day they went to Gary's house, having made an appointment. The unsuspecting man opened the door. He was wearing a homemade suit that looked like pajamas. Adam strode through the house in his masterly manner. What did you want to discuss with me? Is it about business? Gary asked. Yes, business and this house. What does that mean? I'm not selling the house. I'm not going to buy it from you. With a conspiratorial wink, the unexpected guest smiled, making the homeowner uncomfortable. Explain what you want from me. I thought you had a business proposition. Yes, that's right. Adam, without waiting for an invitation, sat down on the sofa in the living room and put the documents on the table. I want you to take a look at this. He nonchalantly pushed the papers towards the confused man. What are these? Gary ran his eyes over one sheet, then another. The men watched as his expression gradually changed. What? What do you want from me? Nothing in particular. Adam answered calmly. I want you to sign these documents immediately and leave the house. You can't do this to me, shrieked a frightened Gary. I'm sure Kayla said those same words to you, but you showed her no pity and just threw her out on the street. I have decided to be merciful purely out of respect for my future wife. I'm offering you the choice of street or jail? And who is your future wife? Shivering with fear of the inevitability of punishment, the man asked. Kayla, your ex-wife whom you betrayed. Enough with the lyrics. Adam stood up resolutely from the couch, holding out a pen to Gary. Sign it or I'll call the police. But you'll give me time to pack, won't you? The hands of a man who had recently been confident in his impunity were shaking. He could not manage the pen, finally signed and handed the documents to Adam. No, he answered firmly. You will leave this house immediately, and neither I nor my wife will ever hear from you again." But Gary tried to object, belittlingly, looking at the man. Immediately, Michael moved at him, and he moved fearfully toward the exit. "You think you're going to get away with this? You don't know what I'm capable of and what connections I have." He shook his fist threateningly, the former owner of the house. "I don't think anyone will want to do business with you." Adam laughed. "All your partners know how you got into business." "Well, that's it." Rubbing his hands together contentedly, the man said as the front door slammed shut. Vengeance had come upon the traitor. Kayla was avenged. He didn't tell the details of the exposure to the bride. He handed over the documents right at the wedding. The woman rejoiced at the unexpected gift, but after a little thought, said with sadness in her voice, "I don't want to live in a house where my ex-husband ruled." Adam gladly fulfilled the wish of his beloved wife and organized the sale of the house. After the wedding, the young couple went on a vacation, which they were looking forward to. They wanted to be alone and rest from all the vicissitudes. Soon it turned out that Kayla is expecting her first child. Then the happy husband announced that he would build the house of his dreams, where they will finally find peace and family happiness.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Charles was preparing to receive guests. Modest get-togethers with friends were planned, which had become a weekly Friday night tradition. There was beer left in the refrigerator. Glasses and a few juice boxes were arranged on the table. A courier had just delivered 5 boxes of pizza, the freshest, still hot from the pizzeria on the corner. Separately, a large old-fashioned for the girls had been ordered. For some reason, the girls usually found pizza to be too colorful and figure-damaging a food. But a lump of starch-rich rice covered, stripped of fish fat, filled with creamy chicken cream or cottage cheese dinner with high-fat cheese completely satisfied. And where ethically? Perhaps the young ladies believed that the more saturated fatty acids from seafood reduced the overall caloric content of this fast food. It's Japanese-inspired. The strongest advocate for sushi was, of course, Betty. She always demanded a set that included 2 portions of a cucumber slice and a lettuce leaf. And Charles had no idea how one could eat that nasty stuff. However, the girl herself ate a maximum of 3 pieces of fitness out of everything. And then she switched to Philadelphia and himaki legs. But woe betide anyone who tried to make fun of her about it. Betty had a temper and a mean tongue. In addition, she had a very capricious character, which showed 10 times a day. Charles tolerated her moods, realizing that if you dated the first hottie in the company, you had to put up with some inconveniences. And Betty was a beauty, stylish, elegant, temperamental, and sexy, with a gorgeous figure, long legs, and a striking impersonator and face. The subject of dreams of many guys in his entourage. The male part of the company Charles sincerely envied, and he heartily enjoyed this envy. Thanks to her, he felt himself a real macho, brutal patron of women's hearts. Although, frankly speaking, the affair with Betty was the only independent life achievement of Charles Gustman. He had nothing else to be proud of. In his 24 years, he had only managed to finish his studies in one of the commercial universities on some passable and completely useless specialty like office management or documents. He himself did not remember exactly and could not check his diploma because he had no idea where he had thrown it after receiving it. And who would need that cardboard? Charles entered the institute to calm down. His mother kept saying about the necessity of higher education. He chose a faculty where he could study without straining himself and have fun at the expense of the abundance of girls. On his stream, he was the only guy, and for the sake of his beautiful eyes and the slightest sign of attention. Classmates were happy to solve interim tests for him, prompted at seminars, and even prepared cheat sheets for the exam. So Charles didn't have to kill himself over his studies, much less expulsion. He was not afraid. Deferment from the army was provided to him for health reasons. Flat Feet is a classic of the genre. Ever since his first visit to the enlistment office, having received his diploma, satisfied with the C's, the guy threw it in some drawer. Never took it out since, never needed it. And on his 18th birthday, his father gave him an apartment completely renovated and furnished with a fancy interior designer, but not some studio in a new building on the outskirts, and a spacious 2-bedroom in a good house of the old fund, located in the quiet center of the city. A car was planned as a graduation present, but Charles refused it. Didn't see the point. Yes, restaurants and cafes, cinemas, clubs, and shopping centers. It was more convenient for him to get there on foot, given the location of his home. For long trips, he ordered a cab or used the King of the Ring. To bother with the car and its maintenance, to limit himself in alcohol because of the need to get behind the wheel and spend extra money on insurance, fines, possible accidents, and other associated with car owners. The guy didn't want the hassle. Instead, he asked for a gift of a good gaming computer with a powerful video camera, cool cooling system, and a huge amount of RAM, and with all the Imperial peripherals to go along with it. And this thing was much more desirable to him. Since middle school, Charles has been sick of computer games. At the first courses of the Institute, he started his own YouTube channel, where he regularly tried reviews of the games he had passed and records of playthroughs. Kept game stories. Over time, the list of topics for stories expanded. The guy did interviews with cyber athletes and reports from competitions, filmed reviews of emergencies. The most popular games made ratings of manufacturers' sites. Announcements of new products commented on retrospectives, showing how developed and changed any of the games from the first to the last part. Arranged video conferences with famous gamers of the world, argued about the peculiarities of clan management. This hobby required a lot of time and effort. Charles devoted all his days to it almost completely. He noticeably rocked the skills of video shooting and editing. He became a good scriptwriter and became proficient in finding hard-to-find information on the net and in libraries, and even managed to master the topic of promotion of videos and channels. In short, thanks to his hobby, guy quite professionally mastered several skills in demand on the modern labor market. But from the point of view of others, all his activities continued to look like a useless children's hobby, and even a regular increase in the number of subscribers to the channel and some earnings from advertising and fans could not convince his friends and family in the opposite. They all believed that the guy is engaged in frank nonsense, but then they added he could afford it. Yes, Charles could afford not to work and fully devote his life to his hobby. His father gave him a monthly sum equal to the average Moscow salary, even though they lived in a relatively small provincial town. A successful businessman, owner of the largest chain of home goods stores in the region. He didn't consider it a big expense. Charles did not think much about the situation. He believed that parents were there to help their children. Custman Sr. remembered well how he himself had worked all his youth without vacations and weekends and wanted his son to be able to spend his younger years. Otherwise, he planned to support Charles for 30 years and then either involve him in the family business or put him in some warm place in the city administration. The son knew about his father's plans, but hoped that by 30 he would be famous and independent thanks to his YouTube channel, and that he'd be out of the woods. But so far, Charles just enjoyed life and engaged in his favorite hobby. At first, his mother periodically brainwashed him, saying that at his age it is time to find a job and cover his expenses independently. That Charles got a job as a specialist in a small advertising agency in the capital. The job took him about 6 o'clock a week. It could be done remotely. And the guys were completely happy with that. Paid there, however, about 10 times less than he received monthly from his father. But the mother calmed down and stopped acting on the son's nerves, which was the whole point of the whole thing. The company in which Charles hung out, from which he regularly met on Fridays, was about the same circle with him. Children of wealthy parents, big businessmen, officials, lawyers, developers, investors. All of them had known each other since childhood. They had practically the same opportunities to start, and most of the buddies took advantage of them. Only good education, often abroad, stable work in large companies, not bad for their age, positions, steep salaries. That's what life looked like for most of the guys in Gustmans and Turridge. Girls, of course, mostly played the role of socialites. Some tried their hand at modeling. Some tried to become a singer or an actress or a fashion blogger. And some just stoked their parents' money for endless clothes, partying, and traveling. But there were a few young ladies who were educated in their field of interest and worked in their specialty, albeit with varying success. Only Adriana stood out from the general mass. A girl from an ordinary working family is now a bohemian artist and a sought-after digital designer. She got into the company by accident with one of the guys. The guy who brought her has long since disappeared somewhere in the vastness of Europe and stopped contacting her. And Adriana stayed and didn't look like a poor relative at all. In general, most of the guys and even girls from Charles' party already had some achievements of their own, clear reasons for pride. But nevertheless, Gustman's buddies did not consider him an outsider. Each of them had also been educated on their parents' money. Thanks to them, he solved problems with the army and housing, a car, and sometimes a job. Almost everyone's parents periodically planted different sums of money for vacations, or to upgrade the car, or just to live. So it didn't bother his friends at all that Charles, in fact, lived on his father's handouts. It was the norm among them. But they didn't take him seriously either. Rather, they treated him as a teenager stuck in his childhood. There was another avid gamer in the company, Charles Guthrie, but he was treated very differently by the crowd, perhaps because he successfully combined his hobby with his work in his father's bank, or maybe because Charles was an official member of the regional cyber sports team. He was well known and respected in this field and regularly participated in cool competitions and won big cash prizes. Charles didn't know the reasons why, but he felt it. Charles perceived as being the same age as his Charles as a younger brother, and even his affair with Betty had not brought him to the level of an adult in the eyes of the company, although it did add a couple or 3 points to his personal ranking. Well, that's okay. Betty, though sometimes a tiresome beauty, was also good in bed. So Charles considered himself a winner, and he would get serious about himself when he would bring his channel to the top and earn large sums on it steadily. The guy was sure that it would happen in the near future. The guests gathered gradually. Guthrie came one of the first, and from the threshold greeted with a welcoming wave of surveillance. Top secret information. Solemnly, he pronounced it all not to be leaked. These are training records. There are a few chips that we are still practicing. We plan to use them at the next championship. We'll make them public. I'm not going to blow my head off, but it's good for you to familiarize yourself with. Charles appreciated the gift on the flash drive. There were recordings of raids in one game, which he himself was not too interested in, but the viewers of the channel liked it. The guy was going to make a small story on it, but he didn't want to go through the levels himself. And from the shop on the video is quite possible to cut suitable footage, as well as to look more closely at the details of the world map, appearance, equipment of characters, and some other features. Gustman connected the flash drive to the computer and dragged Charles to the kitchen, where a video camera, foreign lighting, was already installed. He and his buddy had arranged a short interview beforehand. They had discussed the script, written out the questions and answers. Now all that remained was to shoot the material. Charles seated Kowalski in a chair in front of a low table. He sat down opposite, turned on the camera from the remote control, and began cheerfully looking into the lens. Greetings, dear subscribers. Today my channel is hosting a famous cyber athlete, winner of several regional and federal tournaments, Charles Guthrie. Those who closely follow the world of cyber sports, this name is certainly already known. So now you have the opportunity to get to know the master of the show morning. Thanks to careful preliminary preparation, the shooting took only about 40 minutes. When Charles and Charles returned to the living room, almost the entire company was already there. Only Betty was missing. But that was familiar. In her own sense of good manners, she believed that girls were not only allowed to be late, but even expected to be late. However, the girl showed up just 5 minutes after the interview was over. Charles thought he was lucky. Having come a little earlier, he could not avoid a slight offense, and maybe even a small scandal because of the fact that he was doing all sorts of silly things and not meet his beauty at the doorstep. Presently, the beauty flashed into the antechamber. Shining smile tenderly kissed her bow, and right hand languidly missed me. I have a surprise. Betty stepped aside from behind her back, and a girl unfamiliar to Charles appeared. Please love and welcome. My third cousin Kathy, proclaimed the hottie. The bank's here. Don't be shy. They're all here. This is Charles. I told you about him. He's wonderful. Nice to meet you, Kathy said. A little embarrassed, she extended her hand to Charles. The guy shook it, surprised by the lack of manicure, or rather decor and varnish on the short nails. And in general, Kathy looked unaccustomed, dressed modestly. Not even a mass market, but a station market. Shoes on her feet from the category of cheap, but good. They look more like old sewing boots than the shoes of a young girl. The hair is a natural color of red. Her panties are gathered in a heavy knot at the back of her head. They are loose around the shoulders, like all the girls this summer have on their faces makeup, clearly applied by Betty's skillful hand and also clearly unaccustomed and uncomfortable for Kathy herself. But the smile is a good one, sincere, open, gentle. The girls in their circle are usually Instagram smiles. That is, beautiful photos of genius, not too natural. Mimicry works off the smile. All 32 teeth, but the eyes more often than not remain empty and indifferent. Kathy's eyes, on the contrary, are warm and filled with light, though the tips of her lips are just about to lift. A second cousin, huh? Yes. Wow. Meanwhile, Betty introduced Kathy to everyone here. She called them all by name, gave them a brief description, and considered her duty done. She took Charles out to the balcony for a smoke, and the 2 glass doors to the room closed, as the friendly expressions on his face disappeared. Imposing it on me the best, she complained irritably. To get in, she came from some backwoods, from where the mothers on the dough are born there. And it would be all right, just recommended at our house for the time of the admission campaign, dumped in the dorm. So no, Mom decided that the guest must be entertained and educated. And who's supposed to do that? Of course, you're the same age as me. You'll find a common language, Betty said. She's mimicking her mother's voice. What common ground? She's as dumb as a cork and has no sense of direction in a restaurant. She doesn't know what to order and freaks out about prices of the mall. She doesn't need anything. At the club, she is loud and has a headache. Asked where she wants to go, she says to a museum. I'm like a fool. 3 days on the rights of the hostess, dragged with her, then on the paintings galleries, then the local history, then prickeny on the Museum of Optical Business and Botanical. That's what I forgot there. And it all considers at each showcase for half an hour hangs that something pictures. Pestering the guide with questions is a total waste of time. She's your age. Charles wondered. Isn't it a little late for her to enter? Lezginka went to medical school for 3 years after school. Then she worked as a nurse in a hospital. Now she's decided to go to university to become a real doctor. She dreams of saving people's lives. You see, that's all she talks about all day long. The girl giggled at the work of doctors. She was clearly not the best opinion. And how long did you have to deal with her? Charles asked sympathetically. And 2 more days, Friday, will be the results of the appointment. On Saturday, she'll be off to her village, and I wouldn't even be able to stay at your place tonight because of her. Belle sighed. You'll have to escort the guests home and make sure she gets there safely. As if anyone needs her. Too bad, sighed the boy. But you come back Saturday. How will you see your sister off? It's a deal. I'll try my best to make it to that bright day. Patiently discouraged, said Betty. Charles himself. The unexpected guest did not cause much trouble. She sat quietly in a corner of the sofa, gazed at the company, listened to the conversations, but did not meet in them herself. As her host, the guy poured her a juice. He brought a slice of pizza, offered some other treats, and even for a while maintained a light conversation about nothing. But the girl quickly bored him. And Charles, having apologized, was distracted by other guests. Soon he noticed that Kathy was talking to Adriana with interest, and the conversation was clearly engaging both girls. Proletarians of all countries, unite. Betty, the technologist, also noticed the couple. It's true what they say. People of the same background are subconsciously attracted to each other. It's easier for you, he shrugged. You don't have to worry about the girl being bored. You can mind your own business. Well, I was worried about Milosevic. Vina hummed and hooted. Betty and Kathy were leaving before all the guests. I'm sorry, honey, the girl said. Hugging Charles goodbye, I have to go. I promised to get Kathy home no later than midnight, but you and I will catch up. And I promise you'll miss me. You don't have to leave. Kathy spoke up. You can just put me in a cab and give me the address. I can't drive myself, can I? That's what we'll do. Charles got excited. No, Betty spluttered. As a hostess, I can't leave a guest to his fate. It's simply unseemly. She kissed Charles passionately, waved goodbye to the remaining guests, and taking her sister under her arm, she staggered off into the night. But getting into the cab, she turned to Kathy and said angrily, "What's that? And you've been carried away. Playing the noble game. I'll drive myself, just put me in the cab. I didn't want to disturb your plans." Cousin was embarrassed. "I have plans tonight at 1:00 a.m. I have a drunken giraffe date with a cute boy. If it weren't for you, I'd have to make up an excuse to avoid this house party. And everything was going so well. And you had to step in." Good thing I was able to distract Charles from that thought. "Wait," Kathy said, confused. "Goodbye." "But isn't Charles your boyfriend?" "Charles is my future husband. I hope, at least the income of his family suits me. And he has the right character, peaceful, trusting. They wouldn't think of prying into my life, monitoring and controlling me. He's ready to forget about everything with his toys. You know, they say the ideal husband is one who doesn't interfere with your life. I found one. The main thing is to bring him to the registry office. But that doesn't mean I have to deprive myself of my usual pleasures in the process. And here you are." "I'm sorry," Kathy said conciliatory. "It hadn't occurred to me." "Don't tell me about morality and love marriages," Betty said. "It's all nonsense for the poor." "Something," her cousin reassured her. "I wasn't going to." I added to myself it was useless anyway. For some reason I felt sorry for Charles, who was almost a stranger to her. September was dry and warm. The weather had been almost summer-like all month, and so Charles, about to leave the house, only snorted derisively at the weatherman's forecast of possible rain. "What rain? What are you talking about?" He threw on a light shirt over his t-shirt, picked up his backpack with equipment for shooting, and hurried to meet the cab that came to him. He had to go to the other end of the city, to one of the outskirts of the working regions. The guy hated such places, but today he had no choice. Today Charles had arranged an interview with the youngest cyber athlete in the city, a 13-year-old boy. Despite his age, the boy was a member of the city's famous team of gamers and was known and respected in the gaming community more than once. It was his actions that brought the team the prizes, and in general, having communicated with his hero at several competitions and in the network of the game, I was convinced that the boy seriously understands his game world and can easily shove any older player behind the belt. The kid was definitely worthy of an interview, but due to his age, he could not come to visit the interviewer or meet him. Somewhere in the center of the city, it was necessary to make arrangements with his parents to accompany him, to choose a time, to make long and tedious schedules. Charles decided that it would be easier to visit the boy himself. Especially, he suspected that in the presence of his parents, the kid would not be frank and relaxed enough in front of the camera. An hour after leaving home, he disembarked from the cab at the entrance of the Yum Gay World and called him. "I'll be right down," the boy said into the phone. And a few minutes later, he did indeed appear from the front door. His parents wouldn't let him rent an apartment. He said, a little embarrassed, "Well, it's not a fresh mess. Why embarrass yourself in front of people? But I'm home for the money." They're lying grandmothers. "We can even set up somewhere in the yard." Such a substitution promised Charles additional complications. He counted on shooting indoors, so he took the lenses with him with such a calculation and light to reflect, or for some reason dragged spare batteries for the camera. "I didn't realize I'd have to do something about it." "Okay, well, let's give it a shot. You and I need a flat area with some benches to put you on, so it's shady but not too dark. And no people walking around. They'll get in the way." While they found a place, while they set up the camera, took a few shots, while they filmed the conversation itself. 4 hours passed, although Charles and discussed plans for an interview with his hero. But still the preparation was not as serious as, for example, with Charles Guthrie. Therefore, some of the lines, or even the whole answers had to be shot from several takes, from several angles. Sometimes the boy would get too involved in a topic. Charles had to wait for the end of his arguments while praying that the batteries of the camera would not die. After the conversation was over, Gustman asked the boy to take him around the yard and the neighboring streets to show him the school he was attending and the way to it. He wanted to get some shots of the surroundings for the story's opening and ending. The walk took another hour and a half, and in the process, I felt very hungry and slightly cold. It got noticeably colder outside. Clouds gathered, and the wind blew. It seemed that the forecasters had not lied about the forecast. Having parted with his interlocutor, Gustman decided to look for a cafe or a canteen in the area to have a little snack. And it was better to call a cab to a place whose address you knew exactly. There were no numbers or street signs on many of the houses in the neighborhood. Charles moved towards Center Street. He expected to find a more or less decent establishment there. But no sooner had he gone a few hundred meters than the promised downpour came from the sky. Strong, dense with large drops, it instantly blotted out the guy's light windbreaker. 10 seconds and Charles seemed wet through and through, right down to his underwear and socks. Gustman looked around for some shelter and was lucky enough to see the sign of a Pietrochka through the rain. Huge leaps, carefully covering his backpack with equipment. He rushed toward the store and ducked into its vestibule with relief. It became clear that Charles was not the only one who had thought of sheltering from the rain behind the supermarket doors. The vestibule was packed with locals, and the guy didn't want to jostle among them. Andrew was in the trading hall, but after a couple of minutes he began to shiver from the cold, which smelled from open showcases with milk, with cheese and sausage. Wet, cold, hungry. Charles was angry at the world, and his anger only intensified. After several attempts to call a cab failed. There were no free cars. No one wanted to go out in such bad weather, to beat someone up. Now Gustman thought gloomily. And then he was called out. "Charles, it's you." He turned around and saw a young girl in homemade plaid pants and a stretched t-shirt near the cash register. Her face was vaguely familiar. But that's where only polite conversations with strangers came from. And that's all he needed right now. "You don't remember me." It was affirmative. "Meanwhile, I'm Betty's sister. She brought me to visit you at the beginning of the summer." "And where are you from?" Betty's sister is a hillbilly Glushko who came to apply to medical school. A quiet gray mouse who sat in the corner all night and answered every phrase out of turn. "Why are you bothering with me?" "I'm here on business," Charles explained. "It's short. I'm worried about the rain. You're soaking wet. You could catch a cold. Not for long." Suddenly, the gray mouse got excited. "Let's go to my place. I live in this house. If you let me take your clothes, I'll feed you lunch, just when it's raining." Gustman wanted to refuse, but the argument of winning outweighed everything else. There was no ready food at home anyway. It would be necessary to order and wait for delivery, and also to get to this house. He drove almost an hour back through puddles and evening traffic. It would be an hour and a half. And he didn't even eat breakfast today. I've been running around the yards with my camera all day. Lunch is tempting, he said honestly, looking at Kathy. Well, that's fine. Go on then, she said cheerfully, but at the same time went not at all to the exit of the store, but somewhere in the depths, not understanding anything. The guy followed her at the service exit from the sales floor. The gray mouse slowed down, waved to someone. Svetochka let us out affectionately, she said. Approached the girl to the administrator. It's scary to go outside now. Together with the administrator, they entered the service entrance, went through some sort of warehouse, and found themselves near a large metal door. The employee opened it with her key and Kathy goodbye. Baitov. Thank you. Immediately, she ducked behind her arm and pulled Charles behind her. A step. And the guy found himself in the most ordinary entranceway of the most ordinary Khrushchevka. Yeah. Fun, asked Larissa. I this move almost immediately after moving to classified. Now I use it. If I don't feel like going outside. How was today? The main thing is to get to know everyone and remember who works on what day. How do you get there? Gustman's interested. You knock on the door. I call the cell phone of today's shift, and they open, the girl explained, climbing the stairs. Sometimes you have to wait a bit, but in the evening it's better than going through the yard. It's darker to walk through and safer. Kathy's apartment was on the 3rd floor and looked like a standard grandmother of books. Narishkin Nado bills on the floor, a bulky wall in the great room, a chandelier with pseudo-crystal pendants, a rug on the wall, renovations from 20 years ago. Given the neighborhood of housing in this condition, should have been rented very cheap, that only people are not willing to tolerate, just so as not to live in a dorm. Although perhaps Kathy finds this barrier quite normal. She hadn't seen many others, Charles thought. The girl had disappeared into the bedroom and returned, carrying a large towel and a terry robe. Bright yellow, lilac floral. I'm sorry, I don't have any men's clothes, and you'll feel better in a robe now. You'll agree quicker, she said, smiling a little embarrassed. Go to the bathroom, change your clothes, hanging on the towel. Resident, he is electric. I'll turn it on now. In an hour, everything will be dry by now. With shoes, we just have to figure something out. You've had it in your typical grandmother. You've had your revenge. But Charles was the least of your worries. Clean and mold-free. That's fine. He gladly pulled off his wet clothes and hung them over the snake's eyelids. Surprisingly, this appliance was a new modern one, even with temperature control. I wonder who went broke, the landlord or Kathy herself. Thinking for a bit, the guy let the hot water run and climbed under the shower with a stream of hot water. Quickly burned through, skin bleeding, the elderly. After about 15 minutes, we think. Forgot about the recent snob talk with pleasure-confused towel. Chuckling to himself, got back into his terrycloth robe and headed for the kitchen, planning to grab a bite of some kind of sandwich and head home. It was unlikely that a girl living alone would have proper food, reasoned at most some mittens, salads, diet bread. At least that was the way things were at Betty's place. To his surprise, on the kitchen table was set almost a full meal, salad of fresh vegetables, mashed potatoes with appetizing cutlets, bread in beautiful wicker baskets, sliced cheese, and sausage on a neat saucer, and a mug of hot coffee. Good for you for guessing and not being shy, Kathy complimented him. Sit down, everything's ready. It's still raining, so we can eat slowly and properly. I never thought I'd end up almost in a restaurant. Charles grinned. This looks delicious. I thought girls didn't cook for themselves. He continued with his mouth full, taking it for a cutlet. But who does? I like to eat. That's why I cook. The hostess shrugged her shoulders. And you're not afraid of your figure? Asked the guy. Not a bit. I have to run so much to study and work that to get fat, just no chance. We are lucky with genetics, in our family all skinny. So you did get in. How's it going for you? Gustman said. He was not interested, but the politeness of the guest obliged to keep the conversation going. "Interesting. Really?" said Kathy. "Tough. But I'm glad I didn't take the concessionary one. After college, you could have skipped the first year. But I thought the school was a few years ago. I could forget a lot of things, and it turned out, indeed, some subjects have to be repeated almost from scratch. How did you work if you forgot everything?" That's what nurses are like nowadays. They don't know anything. But at work, most of the theoretical subjects and did not need, objected the girl, not offended. "Well, the same Latin, for example, or anatomy so in-depth as a doctor. A nurse does not need to know it. Come on, you're not interested. Why don't you tell me about yourself? What do you do? Where do you work? I don't know much about you. You're a guy, my sister Olia told me. Your work has something to do with videotaping. You're a cameraman on TV. I guess." "No," laughed Gusman. "I have nothing to do with television. So if you wanted to become a star with my help, I can't help you. I'm certainly not interested in your world fame," smiled Kathy in response. "What are you filming then?" "I have my own YouTube channel," Charles said proudly. "I make videos for it." He gazed into the girl's face, but saw no admiration or curiosity in it that new acquaintances usually showed at the mention of earning money from videos or glasses. Below the muzzle expressed only restrained interest and polite homeowner to the words of the interlocutor. And bluntly, it is such a sight on the internet. There you can make as if your own page and publish on it videos. Decided to explain in the video blog, the more people will watch them, the more you cite will pay you for advertising, which he inserts in these clips. "But I'm not that dark," laughed Kathy. "Believe me, the villagers know exactly what the internet and YouTube are all about. I use it regularly. By the way, there are plenty of good educational videos on my topic there too. And so do my parents. My dad watches about animal husbandry, and my mom looks for interesting recipes. What is your channel devoted to?" "Computer games," Charles asked glumly and looked outside the window. "It looks like a downpour. We can check our clothes and get out of here. Even if things didn't get the hell out of here, you're home." He was already reluctant to hang out with a lesbian. And now he didn't want to listen to her nonsense at all. Look, she's trying to hurt him. The internet won't help the villagers. All their interests will forever remain in cattle farming for a winter skating rink. "Well, it's not that popular," Kathy said, "but it's quite popular. My younger brother is always watching reviews and walkthroughs and playing it himself. And our neighbor is a field woman. She plays solitaire. Or has she switched from literature?" Charles realized he was being rude, but could do nothing about the irritation building up inside. His peers usually reacted differently when they heard about his bloggers. They showed interest, admired him, asked him about his earnings, looked at him with curiosity, asked him questions about the filming process, about the games themselves, about the cyber sports industry. And this is better, it seems. Takes his occupation as something self-evident and banal. And the fact that we'll talk to the blogger, 1,000th in stories, which daily awaits many subscribers from around the world. It does not hurt a bit. Some other grandmother. Solitaire. Kerchief. It's her part-time job. She wins there some equipment, but virtual in the sense of enemy tanks, probably, and then sells and buys them, presenting painted tanks to play with them later. Although it probably doesn't surprise you, since you communicate in this sphere. It's only strange to me. Babafield says that so almost earns a second pension, and even more than one. She also plays some other game. I don't know the name, but she said she downloads characters for other players for money. It's probably something about the Orient. Charles took a while to digest the information. After that, he peppered the rubber band with questions about his roommate. How old? Who does she live with? How long has she been playing games? How do people around her feel? What does she play on? The guy had already realized that it would be a good idea to make a story about such a wonderful grandmother. He'd go right after the video he made today. The youngest cyber athlete against the oldest gamer subscribers would be thrilled. Kathy honestly tried to answer, but as it turned out, she didn't know much. Eventually, the girl gave up. "Look," she said to you, "it is easier to go to our village and talk on the field yourself. She might be willing to do an interview for your channel. I'm going this weekend. In 2 days. Let's go together." Charles agreed. After a brief discussion of the trip plan, the guy started to head home. The downpour had already subsided, lunch had been eaten, and Charles' clothes and even his sneakers were surprisingly completely dry. Gustman hailed a cab and promised Kathy that he would pick her up Saturday morning. Kathy explained something about electric trains, but the idea was uninspiring. What was the last thing he wanted was to be stuck in a cold, dirty carriage amongst the country folk and villagers. He rented a nice SUV for the weekend, on which he could get to the village quickly, from comfort, and in case of anything to leave there as soon as he finished shooting. There was no need to linger in this shithole, because the public commuter transportation schedule didn't suit you. The 2 days leading up to the trip were a hassle. Gustman was editing footage of a young cyber athlete, recorded the passage of one of the levels in a strategy game, hosted a stream for his subscribers, met Betty. In short, I was busy almost around the clock, thinking up a story about the grandmother he'd made the trip for. The guy didn't have time, but he hoped to do it on the road. Betty, to his absence on the weekend, treated as usual, capricious, offended, and long-lasted because of the fact that the groom exchanges 2 free days with her for some village old woman. But by the end of the evening, she graciously forgave Charles and promised that she would miss him very much. For some reason, Gustman did not tell the bride that he was going to her relatives, and one of them together. He parked at the house at 6 o'clock, as agreed. Kathy was already waiting at the entrance together, with 2 volumes and bags. "I've packed some goodies and some unseasonal things I need to take home and store there," she explained. "Why? You'll need it again next season. You could just put them in your closet. You have a lot of them. Almost all the closets there are occupied by the owner's things. I don't even know if I'll be living here next season. It's a relative's apartment. He inherited it from his mom and kind of doesn't need it. It's weird. Yeah. So many people struggle for years to have their own corner, deny themselves everything, get into mortgages. And here a man got free housing. And he doesn't need it. And it's even a burden." I say indefinitely hummed and shrugged my shoulders. A world where people deny themselves everything to get a roof over their heads was a guy, to put it mildly, far from. But he let me in while he lived, to keep an eye on the place. It's a rough neighborhood, you know. "It wouldn't be good if the apartment was empty," Kathy continued. "He'll decide what he wants to do with it. Maybe he'll sell it in a couple months or renovate it and rent it out. Then I'll move into a dorm. I can't afford it on my own." "Oh, I see. Listen, Kathy, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to entertain you with conversation during the trip," nodded Gustman. "You don't like to be distracted while driving?" The girl asked understandingly. "Well, I'll read for now." She took out a thick book from her bag, wrapped the paper around it, and delved into it with visible interest. Charles was surprised that the girl was not at all offended by his veiled requests to be quiet. Betty would have been in her place. It was scary to think about. First, she would have kept quiet for a while. Then she would have tried to make conversation about something else. And then she would have pouted because Charles didn't respond to her words. Then she would have made a scandal right there in the car. Despite the fact that a man behind the wheel shouldn't be distracted and nervous. Maybe Kathy was only quiet for a while. But no. It turned out that the girl is quite capable of occupying herself for the duration of the trip, and the reluctance of her acquaintance to be distracted from the road was taken seriously. She read, sometimes taking a break from the book, and looking thoughtfully out of the window. Occasionally she made some notes, but she didn't bother to talk. This is going to be perfect, Charles thought. In the blissful silence of the car, he had time to think over the script of the future video in relative detail, to make a list of additional questions for the interview, to estimate what shots and plans should be made to emphasize more vividly the rural origin of his future heroine. Only when the SUV drove into the village, Gustman distracted from reading, asking to show the way to the house. The girl is quite sensible and in time prompted the right turns. For what Charles I even had a little respect. After a beautiful goodleaf fence, behind which a well-groomed rider could be seen, the boy slowed down in a cheerful mood. And when he and Kathy passed into the station, his spirits soared. Almost at the gate waited a round milestone, height and a boy of about 12 years old, peering curiously at the lush guests. Wow, this is real. Gamer Kathy, where did you get it? The kid said, hearing his YouTube nickname. Charles smiled, noticing the delight and admiration in the kid's eyes. He suddenly felt like a budding rock star, having met a devoted fan on the outskirts of the world. This is Charles, Oleg's fiancé. Remember her? Ask Kathy's brother. Wow, so he's also related to us. Guys, you're crazy, exclaimed the boy and turned to the guest. And you'll be with us for a long time. I'll call the guys. We watch your channel all the time. You have a cool breakdown of strategy and passages are useful. Tell us how you did at that castle. That kid started spouting off game names, terms unfamiliar to Kathy, but seemingly understandable to Charles and me. William, she interrupted her brother, laughing. Let the man rest and eat his breakfast. You'll have time to hang around. A voice came from the side of the house. A stately middle-aged woman was approaching them on the path. Apparently, Kathy and William's mother has lost all peace since you called, and when she heard you were coming as a guest, she almost spent the night. He's been on the porch looking all over you and knocking all his buddies off their feet, she added. With a chuckle, they argued really with him on the same blogger will come or confused and something. Passing the use. This is my mom, Aunt Jenna. This is William, my brother. We'll have tea after breakfast. Then we'll get down to business. After breakfast, Charles surrounded William buddies. The crowd will snap at 12, 14 years old. More than 2 o'clock passed in conversation and questioning, but for Gustman they flew by unnoticed. He was proud and pleased with his sudden popularity, even though it had caught up with him here on the edge of the world, as he put it to himself. His adult peers were interested in his bloggers, but their interest was more restrained and focused more on the aspect of earning money from videos. Boys admired his work sincerely and fervently and asked more questions about games, features of their passage game worlds. In short, just about what occupied the guy himself. The conversation with the boys took Charles seriously. It lasted until almost noon and would have lasted even longer if Kathy, who had left the house, had not asked the internet star with a sneer, "Have you forgotten why you came to see us?" Gustman snapped, "Indeed, time is running out, and here he is playing Superstar." To his happiness, young fans were happy with the news that their idol came to interview Baba Poli. The guys immediately recommended her in the best possible way. They decided with glee that they should have made a story about her a long time ago and sent Charles to the neighbor to get acquainted and agree on filming. He wanted to take one of the adults as a chaperone, but to his surprise, both Kathy and Aunt Jenna refused. With a support group like that, you'll have an easier time convincing Baba Paul, Kathy said, nodding at the boys. She was used to her neighbors thinking. She was out of her mind for her fondness for a little teasing. We don't do that, of course, but she dislikes everyone just in case. She's on the same page with the boys. That's how it turned out in the end. Paula turned out to be just a plain old lady with nothing to show for it. But Charles watched her talking to the boys about their common hobby, and he realized the old lady could really put a lot of gamers under her belt. Upon seeing her gaming computer, the boy whistled in admiration, and learning that in one of the games she is not just an ordinary participant and the head of the clan, naturally respected the 78-year-old woman and confirmed his desire to shoot an interview with her. The grandmother knew about his channel, but treated it with less enthusiasm than William and his comrades. However, under the pressure of requests and persuasion, The company of boys did agree to the story with their participation. Charles by this time had already realized that the script he had come up with was no good. He planned to show a remote village and an old, not powerful grandmother stove who can hardly move around the vegetable garden and yard, but in the virtual world is reincarnated into a strong, dexterous warrior, the protector of the magical world. The village, according to his idea, was supposed to turn out gray and shabby. The grandmother is out of the game world, miserable and lonely. But during the conversation with young fans and with Wendy himself, the guy realized that such a video would be just blatant disrespect for these people. The concept had to be changed literally on the fly. To his luck, the woman of the field said that she would be ready to shoot only tomorrow. At least useful. We need to clean up the house a little, she explained, so as not to inadvertently embarrass the whole network. Charles ran through the list of questions with her, had a preparatory conversation. The rest of the day, as long as the light outside allowed, filmed his heroine's backyard, the street she lives on, general plans of the village home he and Dimka, who accompanied his idol in his adventures, returned to the very dinner. At the table, Charles met Kathy's father. He had a drink with him, thanked him for the shelter, told him a little about Betty and her parents. Relatives, after all. After dinner, we had a bath with a steam room and fresh brooms, an obligatory entertainment for city guests. Exhausted by the events and impressions, Charles barely crawled to the room he had been assigned and collapsed on the bed. Fresh sheets, soft featherbed, airy lush pillow, the intoxicating smell of clean linen dried in the sun, which no laundry conditioner could duplicate. It all suddenly seemed so cozy and homey to the guy. Suddenly, he thought that he should make friends with Kathy and her family, if only to pick a roommate once in a while, to relax and clear his head. And what a backwoods village it was. No mud, no ramshackle huts, and the inhabitants are quite civilized. What's one grandmother of the field worth? 78 years old. Like a balloon in computer and modern games. Charles tried to think again about tomorrow's shooting, but fatigued by impressions and unusual for him load, walking Bono quickly became confused in his thoughts, and he was also very thirsty. He should have brought a mug of water or kvass with him to his room. After all, the offer was to bake iron. He refused. Now he would have to get out of bed and find the kitchen in the dark, unfamiliar house. Charles sighed reluctantly, got out of bed, and looked out the door. The house was dark, and everyone seemed to be asleep. No, there was a light on the veranda, and there were soft female voices coming from it. No other way. Mom and daughter are resting after the bath. The boy thought and headed in that direction, hoping to ask the women for water so that he wouldn't have to wander around the house. He walked quietly so as not to wake up the rest of the household and reached the sacred space later, when he suddenly froze on the spot. A scrap of conversation reached him. "You're too protective of him." Aunt Jenna spoke cheerfully. Not like a hostess of guests. Hasn't she fallen in love? No, Mom. Alice's voice answered in the woman's tone. I just feel sorry for him. He seems like a nice guy, kind and enthusiastic. Alex is spinning him as she wants from him, runs on a date to some guys, with whom she meets through the internet just to fuck. It's true, when I was staying with them, she never spent 13 o'clock at home. And every time she bragged to me about the hot guy she was going to see tonight, she'd show me pictures. She never said a kind word about the games, but when she's with him, she's such an affectionate bunny. My favorite, my Poozy Poozy Poozy. It's all she's got to play for. She could have gone out with her coworkers. Why keep it to yourself? Couldn't he have found a better one? She says she is satisfied with the income of his family, and as a husband, he is quite useful to her, because he is so busy with his toys that her life will not interfere. Imagine how I felt hearing that, especially after I met Charles. I first thought he was just as cynical, rude, and then I watched him as well when she introduced us, and also after that, and today, and felt so sorry for him. Like you know, an abandoned puppy. Gusman, stunned by what he had heard, carefully stepped back into the corridor. He had already forgotten his thirst. He crept quietly back into the room and banged the door awkwardly against the jamb, but did not pay any attention to it. He sat down on the bed and lowered his face into his palms. What shame! How vile, how nasty to find out such a thing. So Betty twists his tail and is not the least bit embarrassed about it, and even brags about his adventures. And to who? In front of her wiretapping sister, who can hardly keep her mouth shut. And only in front of her. Suddenly her stalling is already known by their entire company. And only Charles is still unaware of the length of his horns. Suddenly everyone's been laughing at him for a long time, or pitying him in secret like an abandoned puppy man. And the comparison should be humbling, but it's actually shameful. No, Charles did not feel the despair of a betrayed Betty in love. He was not in love for a minute, though he sincerely admired the girl's beauty and sexuality. He felt only resentment and anger. Look how for a chump he keeps his family income, suits her, and wants to make a husband out of him, who will support and not interfere. What a bitch. I've got to do it now. Right now. Right now. Tell her to go to hell. Don't find out. Don't ask. Don't accuse. Don't make excuses. Just send her to hell. And so that she would understand how much he despised her, how much he hated her, and would not try to object or apologize or start a scandal. By the way, how could he even tolerate her poise and scandalousness for so long? Were the big tits really that much of an eyesore? Charles dialed, was Betty's number, but heard only the answering machine message. Writing to one of the messengers seemed like a bad idea to convey all his emotions. Texting alone wouldn't do it, but a video message to the ladies, it would be best in front of the camera. He would be able to express anything by tone of voice, facial expression, pose, angle. It's a habit. And send that recording to Telegram. She uses it most of the time. She'll see it. She won't say she didn't look at it. She won't say no. Charles opened the laptop that was on the table, adjusted the lighting angle, set the table so that the picture would turn out as he planned with the right light and the right background. Finally, the guy sat down in front of, but morning turned on the video recording program. But no sooner had he begun his address to the door. The rooms fell away and she walked in. Vanessa looked closely at the face. Guest closed the door behind her and said a little guiltily, "You overheard me and Mom, didn't you?" "Why would you say that?" asked Gustman. Angrily, "I heard the door slam, and I can tell by the way you look. You've got that look on your face right now." A face, Charles thought grudgingly, not unlike that of an abandoned puppy. What would she know, that girl? "I lured her to my place. She flapped her eyes at me, then texted me all weekend. She could have told me about her sister. She could have. Why didn't you tell me if you were so decent? And now you feel sorry for me. You see, I'll show you an abandoned puppy, and I'll show your sister that she's not the only one who can sleep around and lie to your face." But of course he didn't say all that out loud, just shrugged his shoulders as indifferently as possible. "It's a normal face, don't make it up, and get out of here." He rose from the chair, pulled Kathy by the arm, pulling her away from the bed door, drew her to him, hugged her firmly, kissed her as he kisses the most desirable lovers. And feeling the girl's reciprocal movement, he smoothly lowered her onto the bed about the switched-on camera, which stood in front of the laptop until the morning. Charles never remembered. The first thing, Adriana dragged a decrepit Viennese table from the bedroom. She stopped it near the kitchen table and climbed into the seat with her legs. For some reason, out of all the furniture in the apartment, the artist preferred this old man of Zenith production, and to use more stable and strong stools refused flatly. The girls had been talking to each other for several months, since that party at Charles's in early summer. Then they got to talking, found in each other a lot of common interests, sense of humor, views on life. They exchanged phone numbers and became buddies. Most often, Adriana met Kathy after university, and if she had a free evening, led her to some bohemian event. But she visited her new friend at least once a week. But she did not invite her to her place, referring to the difficulties with her parents, with whom she still had to share an apartment. Usually meetings were planned in advance, but yesterday Adriana had called and stated unhesitatingly that she needed to talk urgently. What time tomorrow is free? And now at 7 o'clock the artist was already taking a cup of hot coffee from the poured leaves. The hostess moved her friend Sugar and looked at her questioningly. "Come on, tell me," she said, with difficulty suppressing it. "What is your fire?" I hypothesized Adriana. "And to be sure, you have your hands up to the sky." The pent-up frustration of female curiosity. "And only you can save me." "And how interested?" asked Kathy. "You tell me, what happened between your sister and Charles? What happened between them? Don't you know?" Adriana blurted out incredulously, texting Betty something like, "We're breaking up. I'll bring your stuff back Monday at 6 o'clock. And then he was out of range. And then on Monday, he brought a box. You know what's in it? Shampoos and makeup and combs. The kind of stuff that girls leave with guys who sleep over. I didn't even go into the apartment. I just handed it to her across the threshold. She didn't take it, started to ask him what happened. So he just silently put this box by the door outside the window on her, so on Betty, and he turned around and walked away. And he hasn't picked up the phone or returned her texts since. You know a lot more than I do. Where did you get those details, by the way?" Kathy smiled. "I was there," the artist explained. "I was just visiting Betty's father. We're supposed to sponsor a new exhibition. We were talking details. I was about to leave, and in the hallway I caught this scene. The box went into a corner, the hallway bumped. The door slammed, and she ran off to her room sobbing. I wanted to comfort her and find out what was wrong, but she kicked me out. The girls tried to talk to her, but they only found out about the message. About what and where now. She can't get anything from him at all. He just says he's busy editing. He's not in time. So I thought you might know something." How would Kathy shrug? "We didn't write that we weren't communicating. I did let her know when I moved to town. She said, Oak, we should meet somewhere. That's all." "And Charles? What about Charles?" Adriana was immediately interested. "Nothing, really. We met by chance a couple of weeks ago and chatted. Then he came to our village, filmed a story about our neighbor, stayed with us, and that was it. It's about Gamer's grandmother. Look, fire. I just love her. I wish I could keep the same intellectual activity, interest in new things at her age," my friend said enviously. "I reviewed the story several times, and even Donatello to her," Kathy clarified. "Not Charles. No. Charles inserted her phone number at the end of the video and said that Wendy's fellow villagers were skeptical of her hobby. Like you can text her with words of encouragement and approval. It'll make her feel good. Well, you must have seen it yourself." I checked the card on the phone. So I sent her a transfer with the words of encouragement. It's a little 1,000, but I think she'll be pleased. "That's cool." Vanessa said it sincerely. "You're good. Should I watch the video too? It's a neighbor after all. Look, it works out that way. The breakup messages were sent because of your trip. You didn't notice anything strange about him at the time. Maybe something happened. Maybe he was acting unusual. I don't know how he normally acts. I've seen him 3 times in my life. Well, we corresponded when we were preparing for the trip. We didn't really hang out in the country. He was working on his roller. I didn't come there for a vacation either." Adriana sighed disappointedly. For a while she tried to pester her friend with questions, but soon she realized that she really didn't know anything. Thanking her for the coffee, the artist Cooper gasped. Kathy poured herself a second cup some time and drink, pensively looking at the worn wallpaper on the wall, then resolutely picked up her phone. "Adriana came to see me, trying to ask me the reasons for your breakup this. It seems you've riddled your entourage with intrigue," wrote the girl in messengers. A minute later, the phone rang. Charles' number popped up on the display. "Hi. They got to you too," he said into the phone. "Well, I'm kind of related." Vanessa grinned. and said something to our artist. What could I say? I said I don't know anything. This is strictly your business. I had nothing to do with it. So you had nothing to do with it? Charles asked, a little surprised for some reason. Of course, I'm indirectly to blame for your finding out about her affairs, but I'm not going to tell your company about them. Am I? So you'll have to come up with some plausible explanation for your decision to appease the public. She finished mockingly. I already have, and I'll tell everyone that I broke up with Betty because of you. How's that sound? Will you be my girlfriend? Kathy was silent for a few seconds, then said slowly, if it's a joke, it's a bad one. And if it isn't, I'm not ready to discuss it right now. I have to get ready for school. I just wrote to warn you. Bye. Bye. She hung up. It rang. She sat for a while longer, looking at the familiar pattern on the wallpaper and sighed, heading for the Andes. Anyway, the lectures would start in 2:00, and there was no need to be late for them. Charles looked thoughtfully at the phone screen, carefully laid the gadget on the table. She wasn't ready to discuss it, but she should be. Yes, any girl in her position would have agreed without hesitation to a guy like him. Gustman, even for most city girls, he's a bargain. What about a college girl from the country? With money, with an apartment, good-looking, with a light character, not bad in bed. Not bad at all. He remembered the night he spent in tears. He'd bet his head that the girl was pleased with him, more than pleased. And what more did she want? Charles tried diligently to get angry, but he couldn't. In the past few days, he had realized that he needed this student from the village, and she was the only one. The night didn't faze the guy. He hadn't experienced anything like it in a long time, or maybe never at all. Betty, like the partners Charles had had before her, had diligently flaunted their sexuality, cultivated it, nurtured and cherished it. And in bed they were inventive and temperamental. But Gustman felt every time he made love to Betty, it was as if he were working for the camera. She had to be more than just loved. She had to be impressed. Everything was always very beautiful, very long, very calibrated and cinematic. Allah took graceful poses, made sure her face was turned to her partner in an exceptionally favorable angle. She moved too smoothly and even moaned melodiously. Sometimes Charles mockingly wondered if she wrote her own scripts every time she stayed overnight at his place. It was too much like a competently made erotic movie. Sure, the process excited and thrilled the guy, but after it was over, Gustman was always left with some feeling of emptiness and artificiality. And the tears were completely different. The girl, who in everyday communication seemed just nice and did not cause any red thoughts in bed, turned out to be very sexy, passionate, relaxed, and sincere. Charles somehow immediately realized that she did not care about any impressions. Kathy wanted him exactly him, not some invented hero from a long-read lady's novel or just her fantasies. And she took everything he could offer her, not thinking about the angles of smooth movements, the melodic style of his quiet cries. And she gave everything she could, too, completely unashamed of her body and her reactions, not caring what Charles might think of her. It's that genuine desire. That genuine passion is the real thing. Hurt the guys far more, far deeper than he'd first thought. That night, he did not analyze anything, just gave in to emotions, sensations, plunged into them with his head, and forgot about everything. And only sometimes he would suddenly surface, and as if looking at himself from the outside, he was surprised to note, wow, it happens like that. He could not believe that a simple touch to a woman's body, far from the model standards, can so surround and head damage such strong emotions. But he immediately threw away his surprise and disbelief, and again plunged into the sweet whirlpool of caresses and kisses. Funny, but the only time when Charles, as it turned out, had sex on camera, he was extremely relaxed and sincere, and did not think about the script for a second. Damer. Yes, since morning he had discovered that she was still writing the happening in front of her. And the first thing he wanted to do was delete the recording. But then I was curious. What was going on that night that he feels so happy and embarrassed like a schoolboy after his first kiss with the girl of his dreams? Maybe it was worth revisiting and finding out, and he left the clip and later revisited it more than once and even subjected it to some editing, cutting out everything that didn't involve sex. But he could not find the answer to his question. After studying for a week, Charles decided that he should just repeat the experiment, and maybe not once or twice, but as many times as it took to get to the truth, to understand why it took him so long to get rid of his thoughts about it. An unremarkable, generally unremarkable girl. What's she so fascinated by? It's Kathy. That time in the village, waking up in the morning and looking at the glowing light bulb under the ceiling that neither of the two of them had ever realized to turn off. Throughout the night, Gustman worried about how Kathy would behave. Suddenly, the girl would start hitting on him, or with glances and hints, reminding him of what had happened. Or maybe she'd start blackmailing him. It happens. However, Kathy behaved in a completely normal way, as if nothing had happened between them. She was still sweet and friendly, as a hospitable hostess should be, but nothing more. The boy did not notice any meaningful glances, not a drop of embarrassment, not a hint of the previous night at breakfast, as if she had gone to bed with him solely to fulfill the duty of hospitality. Then Charles was again distracted by Dimka and his friends, who came to the house right from the morning. And then he spun with the shooting or defense did not see. Only just before leaving suddenly realized that on the one hand, he was afraid to get into the same car with her, afraid of explanations on the road. And on the other hand, he wanted these explanations to understand what she thought about everything that had happened. At the same time, Betty Gustman is practically forgotten about. Wrote her a text message in the morning, put his phone on silent mode, and put his ex-fiancée out of his mind. But he was worried about Kathy. To his relief and surprise, the girl behaved completely calm. All the way to the city she read, occasionally pausing to mull over information and inspect a book. Bringing her to the driveway, Charles unloaded a volume of clean parental bags from the trunk, taking advantage of the fact that there was a car with an occasion. Loaded the daughters, a month's supply, hits, hauled the bulks up to the floor, taking over the apartment. Kathy gently thanked the guy for his help and, judging by her mood, intended to say goodbye. And then Charles could not stand it. "Listen," he said to his front door. "I wanted to talk about tonight." "Is there anything to talk about?" Vanessa was surprised. The prepared speech stuck in Charles' throat. "You were upset to hear about Valka. You wanted to calm down somehow, to redirect your energy, to distract yourself, maybe get back at her. That's the only reason this happened. And I had nothing to do with it. You would have gone to bed with any other girl. I just happened to fall into your lap. Just the usual erotic impromptu from a guy who has been hurt. No, it was definitely good. I'm well aware it won't happen again. So there's nothing to discuss. I'm glad you and I have the same perception of this situation." Crushed, Charles nodded goodbye and left the apartment. It was only a few days later, when the first impressions had subsided, when the accidental video had been rewatched more than once, and when he was finally able to admit to himself that he wanted to do it again, Gustman suddenly thought, well, I in my then state would have laid with any girl. And Lenotchka just happened to fall into my lap. But why did you agree to stay with me tonight? Had he known that Kathy had been tormented with the same question all these days and was terribly afraid to formulate a truthful answer to it, at least for herself? Betty had not been able to find a place for the second week. Her ex-fiancé's behavior had offended her to the core. She was indignant, angry, and unhappy at the same time. First of all, because she'd been dumped in the first place. Such a thing had never happened to the beautiful Betty. She was always the first to break up a relationship. Secondly, it pissed me off that Garrick informed me about the breakup via Messenger and just put it in front of me, refusing to give any explanations. It was disgusting and humiliating. But also not subsiding attention of friends added Wendy to the fire, igniting the girl from the inside out. At first their looks were sympathetic, but quickly changed to interested curiosity, and a little later became something contemptuously pitying. Her first beauty of the company was thrown by a guy whom no one took seriously, even for video blogs, who played sharply to herself in children's toys. Already a few years declared in the status of a beginner YouTube, she was not good. How do you live with a reputation like that? How does it feel to bear such a blow to one's self-esteem? At first, Betty was infuriated, suffering aimlessly, but soon her emotions transformed into a burning hatred that quickly found Robert. Naturally, it was directed at Charles. Guys, revenge was needed for her Al-Qaeda-tainted reputation, for the ruined plans for a future in which she saw herself as Mrs. Gustman, secure and carefree for the few years she had spent having an affair with him, though she could have used them more productively. The idea of revenge came quickly. To Charles, what was most dear to him was his channel, and, as the girl had noticed, its popularity had begun to grow steadily recently after 2 commercials about a young cyber athlete and an old lady gamer show. So the channels need to be destroyed. I just have to figure out how. Betty was lucky. When she was sorting through the box of things Charles had brought her, she found a set of keys to his apartment. It was in the cosmetics room among the creams, pencils, liners, and other things every beauty needs. The guy just didn't see it. He probably didn't even look in the cosmetics. Why would he? Good, Betty decided. Now she had access to his house, which meant she had access to his computer. So she could get on there and delete his stupid channel and his account with all the videos and subscribers. That's the kind of thing that would give Charles a stroke. It would be the cruelest revenge, even tougher than marrying an oligarch and making him hire Gustman to clean the toilet. The only thing left to do was to get the moment when Charles would leave the house for at least a couple of hours and break into the apartment. And then she could figure out what to do. Betty had to spy on Charles' house for several days. Eventually, luck smiled on her. The guy walked out of the driveway and headed for the nearest parking lot. The king of the ring picked out a car, got in it, and drove off somewhere. Betty wasn't too interested in where. She realized that Charles was going to the other side of town. He didn't like to order a cab that far, so she had at least 200 hours. Having waited for order about 15 or 20 minutes to be sure that Gustman did not forget anything and would not come back soon, the girl quickly entered the entryway and then, trying not to make any noise, slipped into the apartment. The first thing she did was to look and trace her possible rival in the rooms of the kitchen bathroom. Suddenly, Charles had another woman, and it was because of her that he had flipped out. Then she's worth tracking down and smashing into the wall, too. Betty will figure out how, but she found no unaccounted for feminine belongings of the abandoned bride. So she went to her always-on computer, sat down in her chair, and studied her desktop. Looking for a browser icon, she wasn't a very confident user, but her iPhone was sufficient for her daily needs. And then, like Charles, working with a desktop computer. The girl never kept track, so she had to look closely at all the shortcuts and folders. Files piled up on the desktop. The name of one of the files. The video caught the girl's attention. Charles always named the recordings in a pattern, first with the date of shooting, and then the title of the story. Apparently, this role had been taken on the exact day that he had received the breakup message from Gustman. The title, however, was not here at all, hence the intrigue and spile. Clicked and mouse over Apple to start playback, and froze. Came on the line, unable not to tear her eyes away from the screen, not to believe what she sees. Foxy little Foxy. All right, knave girl. That's her correctness. That's her morality, her naivety. She jumped into bed with her sister's fiancé. No shame, no conscience. She's a juvenile bitch. And the groom's a good one. What did he find in this countryside? Why did he fall for her? He didn't just fall for her for real. Judging by the fact that he dumped her Betty, if he'd just slept with the cute, silly one under his arm, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Girls of this status, maids, waitresses, saleswomen, student nurses, did not perceive as rivals, and sex with them put them on the same level as onanism. A man wanted to blow off steam. What's the difference? Will he work for it with his hand or use such a disposable girl? It doesn't make any difference. Betty wouldn't consider it cheating, but she wouldn't have noticed the episode. But with the breakup, this episode took on a whole different coloring. Watching to the end as Charles had fun with her sister. The girl wouldn't. She irritatedly turned on the video and went to the balcony for a smoke and come to her senses. She was literally shaking with anger. But fortunately, the cigar port revealed not only cigarettes, but also a joint recently given by a buddy. After a few puffs, Betty let go. And a minute later, a new plan came into her head, with the help of which she would be able to destroy both her former fiancé, her Rasputina, and her relative at one stroke. The idea was brilliant, but required returning to the computer in complete concentration. Well, I did my best. Just an hour of fiddling with her submissive equipment and home porn. Charles and Kathy's footage was uploaded to the Savin Gamers channel. Subscribers will rejoice contentedly, Betty thought. Slipping out of her ex-fiancé's apartment, Charles returned home after dark. He'd been mindlessly driving around the city for the past few hours, not paying attention to which way he was going or where he was turning. His cell phone was dead, but he didn't plug it into the car protector. He knew that it was only necessary to turn on the gadget. Someone would write or call. Some silly notification would come. Notifications about events from YouTube. And he didn't want to hear, see, or read anything. He just wanted to disappear. Charles met Kathy outside the university in the middle of the day. At the moment of the end of classes, he invited her to some restaurant nearby, ordered a light dinner, and at the end, with his seriousness and responsibility, and for some reason with a terrible excitement, offered her to become his girlfriend, and received a polite, logical, reasonable refusal, expressed in the same friendly manner, which made it all the more frustratingly devastating and murderous. I believe your offer is nothing more than a momentary whimper, Vanessa said calmly, looking into the boy's face. You've been through a breakup, a betrayal, found a moment's comfort in me, and now you just want to prolong it. Even if it doesn't seem that way to you right now, believe me, you'll quickly realize what's really driving you, and you'll start to grow weary of our relationship. You and I are not a couple. Charles recognizes that we have different financial situations, different experiences, different social statuses. You're used to a different kind of girl, and you'll get bored of me quickly. Although, of course, for a while you will like the novelty of sensations, but then you will start to shy away from me. And that's unpleasant and humiliating. Let's just be good buddies, friends. As such, we're nothing to each other. You're definitely a nurse, not a psychologist. Charles grinned, listening to this rebuke. No, what kind of psychologist are you? Then you'd realize that you're rejecting me for one simple reason. You're just afraid. You're so afraid of liking me that you've decided in advance that our relationship is doomed to fail. You're afraid to even try. What makes you think I like you? Defensive, Kathy asked. Because you were with me, you didn't push me away. You didn't make a scene when I started hitting on you. And because I remember how you were with me. I know how girls who jumped in just for sex behave in bed. They could never be like you. Passionate, tender, loving, sincere, and real. Do you believe yourself right now when you tell me you don't want a relationship? But I'm sorry, you didn't lie that night. The girl's cheeks flared. She lowered her eyes and scrutinized the tablecloth for a few seconds. Then she looked up at Charles and said firmly, "That's my business now. What it was when I was. And now I have studies, work to help my parents. And there's just no time for a relationship, even with you YouTube star. So sorry, it's out of the question. Goodbye." Kathy got up from the table and hurriedly left the restaurant. I even mentioned her stupidly. I was just trying to take one last stab at her. You're my girl, Charles thought with a kind of detached tenderness. And only then did she fully realize that it was really for last. Kathy gave him a turn once and for all. Charles Gustman didn't remember the rest of the evening. At first, he was driving around town, trying to figure out how to proceed, how to assuage Kathy's fear of the difference in their social and financial status, and convince her to be together. But the longer he remembered the girl's behavior, the deeper into her character, the more unpromising began to seem to the guy any ideas that arose in his head. In the end, out of the torment of thoughts, Charles sank into a kind of dull indifference. He didn't remember leaving the car in the parking lot and returning to the apartment. He didn't turn on the light or even undress. He just collapsed on the bed and fell asleep without his family. In the morning, he was awakened by the insistent ringing of the doorbell. On the threshold stood Uncle John, the father. The boy barely had time to utter a surprised expression. "Hello," as he received the strongest blow in the face, knocking him to the ground. "Hush, hush," an unfamiliar male voice sounded above Charles' head. "Of course, I understand everything, but let's not do self-mutilation." The stairwell and hallway were suddenly filled with footsteps and voices. Two uniformed policemen appeared next to Uncle John, and someone else in plainclothes, unfamiliar. Charles was lifted from the floor, briefly asked how he was feeling, and taken to a room to talk and look at a computer. Everything that happened next, the guy understood with difficulty their tears. The video turned out to be published on the network, on his channel from his computer. How could this have happened? He had no idea and couldn't explain. The guy dutifully recounted his last night as best he could, explained that no outsiders had access to his channel or computer. He tried to remember in what service he had booked a car, where he had ridden it, explained how and under what circumstances the ill-fated videotape had appeared, and then listened for a long time to the name of the articles under which he is accused by Kathy's father. In his statement, the list turned out to be impressive. Manufacturing pornographic content, distribution of pornography, invasion of privacy, violation of privacy, humiliation of honor and dignity. It was like these phrases were seared into his brain. The guys were tearing him apart from the inside out. Somehow, and in one evening, he went from being an ordinary video blogger to a criminal, and accused under investigation, with no effort at all. Maybe he has partial amnesia. Maybe some particularly cunning virus had gotten into his computers, and he didn't know what to think. But he realized quite clearly, Kathy wouldn't go anywhere near him now. There would be no relationship at all. Events were developing terrifyingly fast, and not at all in favor of Charles. About why this happened, the guy found out much later. And then he paid the bill and left the restaurant. About 10 minutes after Kathy left, he got into his car and drove wherever he wanted to go. At this point, the ill-fated video finally uploaded the network and became available to subscribers of the channel. After a couple more minutes, Charles' phone turned off and disappeared from the network. The guy did not charge it, and then did not find out that the gadget was not just discharged. Something had gone wrong with its settings, and the operating system went down without the possibility of recovery. Subsequently, to find out whether it was an accidental failure or the owner damaged the phone deliberately to hide the possibility of remote control from his home computer was not possible. But in general, Charles had the remote connection set up. He periodically tapped the compass of a tablet or laptop, so he could from his phone. His prosecutors reasoned. William's election flashed an alert for a new video on the Gamer's channel. The boy immediately rushed online to watch the novelty. It so happened that his parents were nearby, so the video was watched by the whole family. No sooner had they come to their senses than the woman of the field burst into the house screaming, "Jenna, there's Kathy. There's a shame, for God's sake." "I saw the faces of the neighbors," confused whispered. "Sarah, what a Jesus." After Charles' visit to the village, all the local boys subscribed to his channel. It was a sure bet that half of them had already watched the scandalous video, which meant that all the adults in the village would know about it in a couple of hours, and by the evening they would see it in detail. How can we look people in the eye now? Aunt Jenna poured herself some Corvalol. "Yes, I'll go now. I'll beat that gentleman's face in," Uncle John said cheerfully. But Wendy stopped the neighbor by throwing. "It was all right. Rich John, He's a bastard, a blogger, and he's got money, as I remember. You punch them in the face, he'll report you to the police, and he'll weaken the whole world. It's not like that. It's like suing him. Wait, like my grandson was Kevin the other day. Wait, he hasn't gotten far yet. Kevin's grandson was a successful lawyer, and as luck would have it, was running the office of one of Gustman Sr.'s main competitors. When I got a call from my grandmother, I found out what was going on. Kevin, dead set on his chance to please a tough client. He explained in detail to Kathy's parents the charges that could be brought against the foul-mouthed blogger. The only point, he said, you need to clarify whether your daughter knew about the filming, consented to it, and to the publication of the footage. That's important. Really? Outrage was Aunt Jenna. Who do you take our Leszczynka for? But the lawyer was adamant. Kathy, who had just reached home, was called. It took the girl a long time to realize what was wrong. But when she did, she burst into tears. However, she quickly pulled herself together, gave the necessary explanations, and at the same time told about today's conversation with Charles. The bastard wanted revenge, she said reproachfully. He seemed so decent. What kind of guys are these days? A girl turned you down, so you should get drunk with grief. No, you have to shame the whole world. Kevin quickly made a few calls, including to his employer. Realizing what benefit can be derived from the scandal around the son of a competitor, to what scandal quickly put in the gun all those who need to again, and went with his grandson Wendy in the city. Wrote an application. He was immediately taken to work. A case was opened, and then everything went very quickly, almost lightning fast. John himself, having sorted out the papers and statements, rushed to Kathy's house and arrived just in time. The daughter was on the verge of hysterics. It seemed that Betty had already called her and made a huge scandal. The girl accused her sister of betrayal, of stealing her fiancé from her, of driving her into depression, of ruining her future, and at the end she declared that she was going to immediately exile everyone who was friends with her on social networks. Let her find out what a homegrown porn star you really are. Sis reprinted it. Kathy rushed. It was too late to close her profiles in VKontakte and a couple of other popular platforms from the eyes of strangers. And Sophia sent out an unfortunate link to everyone before the conversation began, and the girl was flooded with messages from acquaintances, relatives, fellow students, and then from strangers who became her by the photo in the network. The amount of dirt that poured on Kathy from the screen led her to a state close to shock. Her father, who came to her, clung to her like a lifeline. She sobbed, showing him the incoming messages. Her hands were shaking with disgust and hopelessness. The girl didn't know how to cope with the shame that had fallen upon her. But worse, she couldn't figure out how to live with the feeling of betrayal. Charles, could he really have taken them off then? And he hadn't even asked for permission. No warning, no hint. The same Charles she had fallen in love with at first sight at a random party and lived with that love. Lived with that love. All the last few months she tried to get along, to cope with that feeling, and finally she'd realized she couldn't overcome it. Just as she would not be able to transcend her lover's relationship with her sister, even though her sister, not a close relation to the rotten, absorbent Cotton, but would be able to take root in his company, fit into his lifestyle, reach his level. Over the past summer and fall, Kathy had deployed a great deal of inner work, trying to make sure that her sudden feeling did not harm her lover, or their family. Just once she had made a misstep, given a slip. It was that oversight that had now come back to haunt her. Could she have been so wrong about this guy? How he, who had seemed so sincere, so close, so real on that one night, had managed to turn around, a complete scoundrel, and use her to make an erotic video, to publish that video as revenge for refusing to date. What if? And he only offered to date so he could make more videos of her and start an erotic channel as well. The slingshots are not doing well. From these thoughts, the girl had a nervous breakdown, which smoothly turned into a prolonged depression. Parents tried to treat her at home, invite doctors, But after a few months, Kathy had to be hospitalized in a local psychiatric hospital. Outpatient treatment did not help. She spent 6 months in the hospital, and then about a year more recovered from the disease. True, for this she had to be sent to her relatives in a neighboring region. It was impossible to return to the village after everything that had happened. It would have nullified all the results of the treatment. She had to say goodbye to her studies. Kathy could not imagine how she would return to the university and look into the eyes of teachers and fellow students. The girl constantly dreamed that she was dishonored, knew everything. Everyone was pointing fingers at her, laughing behind her back. There were no more medical universities nearby, and Kathy's health did not allow her to go somewhere far away alone. The girl stayed with relatives and became a nurse at the local hospital, where she worked for the rest of her life. While Kathy was in the hospital, Charles was tried. The guy was sent to prison for 6 years, and that thanks to the diligent efforts of his father. But Gustman Sr. couldn't commute the sentence or keep the case quiet. The lawyers were too zealous. Competitors by sheer coincidence, family business, as a result of scandals and litigation. Of course, not collapsed, but shaken. All that happened affected the reputation of the father Charles not for the better. Income fell, and give his son money to compensate the injured party Kathy and her family for moral damage. The elder Gustman refused. Charles' apartment went under the hammer to pay off the debt and legal fees, but the boys cared little. Until the very last moment, he tried to ask Uncle Petya, Aunt Jenna, his parents and buddies to help him contact Kathy, explain himself to her, convince her that he was up to no harm, and that he had nothing to do with leaking the video. But he was never given that opportunity. He wrote long, detailed letters to the girl, but no one wanted to pass them on, not to disturb the Lezginka, out of contempt for the hapless porn blogger himself, as his friends began to refer to him with derision. In his first month in the colony, Charles hanged himself in one of the staff quarters. His parents buried him in the same town where the penitentiary was located, and they made sure that no one in their hometown knew what had happened. Betty went to conquer the capital and 2 years later married a successful Moscow businessman. The fact that her husband is 25 years older than her, the girl is not embarrassed at all. His income suits me, usually, she says, and as for the age, it has its advantages. This nice old man pays my bills and does not interfere with my life. And he certainly won't ditch me for some net like a younger suitor. She adds to herself and mentally thanks Charles for teaching her a lesson. And the worst part is that she does it sincerely.